Hey listeners, how are you all? Thank you so much for being our awesome members. There's a lot to come more. Sit tight, be comfy, put your headphones, now let's begin. The quiet village of Godric's Hollow lay in stillness under the cloak of night. The houses, nestled closely together, seemed frozen, their windows dark save for a few flickers of candlelight here and there. A soft autumn breeze stirred the trees, their leaves whispering secrets from days long past. The street lamps cast small pools of light across cobblestone paths, illuminating an otherwise tranquil scene. Yet, within this calm, danger lingered in the shadows, unseen and deadly. On the edge of the village, one house stood apart, illuminated by the faint glow of a fire inside. The Potter residence was alive with warmth and the promise of safety, yet it was a fragile safety, built on the illusions of trust and the strength of a charm. Inside, Lily Potter cradled her infant son, Harry, against her chest. Her gaze flickering to the window with worry. She could feel the tension in the air, a mounting unease that told her something was coming, something she could not prevent. In the living room, James Potter paced, his wand twirling in his fingers, the nervous energy radiating from him almost palpable. He stopped and looked at Lily, his eyes betraying his concern. "We're safe, Lily. The Fidelius charm will hold. Peter won't betray us." His words were meant to be comforting, but they sounded hollow, even to him. James had known Peter Pettigrew for years and had trusted him with the most important secret of their lives. And yet, a nagging doubt tugged at the back of his mind, a doubt that Peter's timidity, his cowardice, might crumble under the weight of Voldemort's terror. Lily smiled, but her heart wasn't in it. "I know, James. I trust him too. We have to." She looked down at Harry, who was now asleep in her arms, oblivious to the storm that was brewing outside their home. His tiny fingers curled around her robe, a small gesture that filled her with an overwhelming sense of protectiveness. She brushed his dark hair, so much like James's, and wondered how they had ended up here, fugitives, hiding from a world that should have been their sanctuary. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second bringing with it a sense of impending doom that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves more aggressively now. And then, without warning, the night erupted in chaos. A loud crack echoed through the air, a sound that could only mean one thing. Apparition. James's heart leapt into his throat as he grabbed his wand. "Lily, take Harry. Go," he shouted, his voice breaking with urgency. There was no time to question what had gone wrong. No time to wonder how Voldemort had found them. The only thing that mattered now was protecting their son. Lily's face went pale, her eyes wide with terror, but she did not hesitate. Clutching Harry to her chest, she sprinted up the stairs as James turned toward the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he positioned himself between the entrance and the stairs, his mind racing through every spell, every defense he had ever learned. The front door exploded inward, wood splintering in all directions as the Dark Lord himself stepped through the wreckage. Voldemort's serpentine fetu res were cast in the pale glow of the moonlight, his red eyes gleaming with cold malice. He moved with an eerie calm, his wand raised, as though the outcome of this confrontation was already assured. James raised his wand, his voice firm as he whispered, "Bombarda triplex maxima." But the spell barely had a chance to leave his lips before Voldemort's curse cut through the air. A flash of green light and James Potter fell, his body crumpling to the floor as his wand clattered beside him, lifeless. The wall behind Voldemort exploded into a shower of debris as he stepped over James, his eyes fixed on the stairs where Lily had disappeared moments before. Upstairs, Lily heard the sound of James's body hitting the floor, her heart shattering in that instant. She had no time to cry out, no time to grieve. She bolted toward Harry's crib, placing him gently inside and standing over him, her wand forgotten in her panic. The door creaked open, and Voldemort's silhouette filled the room, his cold eyes locking onto hers. "Stand aside," he said, his voice a deadly whisper. "Stand aside, girl." Lily's arms trembled, but she did not move. She knew there was no escape for her, no bargaining that could be done. But she would not, could not, let him take her son. "Please, not Harry. Take me instead," she pleaded, her voice raw with desperation. "Please, not my baby." Voldemort's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Stand aside, foolish girl, or you will die." But Lily did not move. She stood her ground, a mother's love radiating from her in waves, stronger than any magic she could ever hope to wield. She would protect Harry, even at the cost of her life. And in that moment, a deep, ancient magic began to stir. Magic born not from spells or incantations, but from sacrifice, from the purest form of love. Voldemort's expression twisted with frustration. With a flick of his wand, he cast the curse that had ended so many lives before, the words falling from his lips like venom. Avada Kedavra. A flash of green light engulfed the room, and Lily Potter collapsed beside her son, her eyes wide and empty, her final breath leaving her in a soft sigh. Harry, still lying in his crib, let out a small, confused whimper. The world around him changing in ways he could not yet understand. Voldemort turned his gaze to the child, his wand still raised. The prophecy had foretold this moment, the child who would grow up to be his undoing. This was the only way to ensure his victory. With cold detachment, he pointed his wand at the infant. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse flew from his wand, the green light speeding toward the helpless child. But something happened that Voldemort had not anticipated. As the curse struck Harry, it rebounded, the force of the ancient magic Lily had invoked reflecting the deadly spell toward its caster. Voldemort screamed as his body was torn apart, his very soul ripped from its vessel. In an instant, the Dark Lord was no more, his body and soul obliterated. So completely that not even death would have its claim, leaving only the faintest trace of his presence, a fragment of his soul fractured by his last act of existence, taking a mother from her son, linging on so desperately, trying to live, unknowingly latching onto the only vessel available, the infant Harry Potter. As the room fell silent, the house stood still once more, but the air was thick with the remnants of the dark magic that had been unleashed. Harry lay in his crib, unharmed save for a thin, lightning-shaped scar on his forehead, a mark that would follow him for the rest of his life. A symbol of the night that had changed everything. The quiet of the house was eerie, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it an almost mournful air. The wards surrounding the house shattered like glass, and the magical protections Lily and James Potter had carefully woven now hung in tatters, fading into the ether. Yet amidst the stillness, a subtle hum of ancient magic lingered, a powerful resonance left behind by a tragic sacrifice. In the distance, a faint crack broke the silence, a sound imperceptible to most, but unmistakable to those accustomed to magic. Moments later, Albus Dumbledore appeared at the threshold of the ruined house, his long robes swishing as he moved with surprising urgency. He paused for a moment, his keen eyes taking in the devastation before him, the scorched walls, the shattered remnants of furniture, and the oppressive, unnatural stillness that hung in the air. The house felt wrong, not simply broken, but hollowed. Dumbledore's hand tightened on his wand as he stepped inside, the elderly in his grasp, as though even it sensed the disturbance. He moved carefully through the wreckage, his steps silent yet purposeful, and stopped just short of the nursery. The air inside the room was thick, laden with the remnants of unimaginable power. Dumbledore's blue eyes, usually twinkling with warmth and mirth, were grave as they fell upon the crib. There, amidst the ruin, lay Harry Potter, his small form impossibly untouched by the destruction around him. The child's breathing was soft and peaceful, only for his forehead, which had a thin, lightning-shaped scar that glowed faintly with residual magic. Dumbledore inhaled sharply, his long fingers brushing over the edge of the crib. His years of experience told him this was no ordinary magic. He closed his eyes, allowing his senses to stretch outward, searching for answers within the ambient mana. And then he felt it. An absence, like a missing piece of a puzzle. It was as though a part of life itself had been ripped away, leaving behind an unnatural void. Tom, he murmured, the name heavy on his tongue. He could no longer sense Voldemort's presence, not his body, not his magic. It was as though the Dark Lord had been erased, obliterated so thoroughly that even his essence could no longer touch the world. But then there was something. A faint, flickering trace of Voldemort's magic, barely perceptible, clinging to Harry like a shadow. Dumbledore's gaze hardened. The boy's survival was a miracle, but this trace of darkness, it was a question. A problem, and perhaps a danger. Whatever had occurred here tonight was beyond even his understanding. For Lily's magical sacrifice to repel such a curse was extraordinary, but this, the obliteration of Voldemort's body and soul, was something else entirely. Abrupt, hurried footsteps on the stairs interrupted Dumbledore's thoughts. He turned just in time to see Sirius Black burst into the room, his eyes wild with fear and anguish. "Dumbledore!" Sirius gasped, barely able to form words as he took in the scene. His gaze fell on James's lifeless body at the foot of the stairs, and for a moment, he seemed frozen in place, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. "James! Lily!" His voice cracked with raw pain, and he stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside James. His hands trembled as they reached out, grief overwhelming him. For a long moment, Sirius could do nothing but stare at the fallen bodies of his best friends, the weight of their deaths crashing down upon him all at once. "James," he whispered brokenly, "Lily." Dumbledore remained silent, allowing Sirius this moment of grief. But time was slipping away. After what felt like an eternity, Sirius's tear-filled eyes drifted toward the crib where Harry lay. "Harry, is he?" "He is alive," Dumbledore confirmed softly, though there was a tinge of uncertainty in his voice. "Harry survived, Sirius. He is unharmed, except for the scar Voldemort left behind." Sirius staggered to his feet, his steps unsteady, and made his way to the crib. His hands gripped the edge of it as if to steady himself. His eyes softened as they fell upon the child, a glimmer of hope breaking through the devastation etched into his features. "I'll take him," Sirius said suddenly, his voice firm. "I'm his godfather. I'll protect him." Dumbledore's gaze darkened with caution. He was wary of Sirius, unsure of his role in this betrayal. "Sirius," he began slowly, "you were James's secret keeper. How could this have happened?" "No." Sirius's voice was desperate as he turned to face Dumbledore, shaking his head fiercely. "I wasn't the secret keeper. It wasn't me, it was Peter. We switched at the last moment to protect them. Peter was the one who betrayed them." Dumbledore's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt replaced by shock. But the cautious tension remained. "Peter Pettigrew, you expect me to believe that he was the one who kept their secret?" Sirius's fists clenched as he fought to control the rage boiling within him. "You have to believe me, Dumbledore. I would have died before betraying James and Lily." The intensity in Sirius's voice gave Dumbledore pause, but his expression remained unreadable. He studied Sirius carefully, still not fully convinced. "Even so," Dumbledore said, his tone still measured, "you are not in a position to take Harry. The Ministry will be hunting for someone to blame, and right now, they will think that is you." Sirius opened his mouth to protest. But the truth of Dumbledore's words sank in. If he were caught, Harry would be left vulnerable, and Peter might escape. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his rage and grief, knowing that Dumbledore was right. "Then where?" Sirius asked, his voice raw. "You can't leave him here." Dumbledore nodded. "You're right, I won't. He needs to be with family. Someone who can protect him, someone who will care for him." Sirius's eyes lit up with sudden realization. "The Tonkses," he said quickly. "Andromeda's family. She's my cousin. Harry has black blood in him. Through his grandmother, Doria. Andromeda and Ted are good people. They'll take care of him." Dumbledore paused, considering the suggestion. Andromeda Tonks had been disowned by the Black family for marrying Ted, a Muggle-born, but she was a skilled witch and fiercely protective of those she loved. The connection to the Black family through family magic and blood connection should at least hold or even strengthen the sacrificial protection magic around Harry. And the Tonks' home was already isolated enough to be a safe refuge. "The Tonks family," Dumbledore mused, nodding thoughtfully. "Yes, Andromeda is capable, and their home can be made secure. Harry would not only be protected but cared for. They also have a young daughter, Nymphadora. Harry would grow up in a family that understands both the magical and Muggle worlds." Sirius nodded, some of the tension leaving his face. "Dora's a few years older, but she'll be good with him. The Tonkses, they'll take care of him, Dumbledore. It's temporary, though, right? Once I clear my name, I'll take him myself." Dumbledore regarded Sirius for a moment, his expression unreadable. "First, we must find Peter. Without him, clearing your name will be near impossible. Until then, Harry will need a home where he is safe from further harm. The Tonks family is the best option. Sirius's jaw clenched, but he gave a sharp nod. I'll find him, he promised, his voice steely. I'll make this right. Dumbledore placed a firm hand on Sirius's shoulder. Do what you must, but be careful. Voldemort's reach may be gone, but Peter's betrayal is only part of this. There are others in his web. Sirius's face darkened, but he said nothing as he turned and strode from the house, his determination plain. Left alone in the wreckage of the Potter's home, Dumbledore turned his attention back to the nursery. He approached the crib and carefully lifted Harry, the child stirring faintly but settling against him. When Andromeda Tonks opened the door to her home, she was met with the solemn figure of Dumbledore. Harry cradled protectively in his arms. Her sharp features softened at the sight of the baby, and without hesitation, she extended her arms to take him. Behind her, Ted Tonks appeared, his gaze filled with quiet understanding. Sirius sent his Patronus, Andromeda said softly, her voice steady though her eyes betrayed her sorrow. He told us about Lily and James. Yes, Dumbledore replied gravely. A great loss, but Harry has survived. For now, I need your help to keep him safe. Andromeda nodded, her arms tightening around Harry instinctively. Of course, we'll do whatever it takes. Ted stepped forward. What protections will be needed, Professor? We've made preparations, but I'm sure you'll want to reinforce them. Dumbledore gave a small nod. Indeed, your home will lay with layers of wards to guard against hostile intent, magical tracking, and intrusion. He paused, his eyes sharp. I must ask for some time to construct these protections. I will ensure the initial wards are sufficient, but the more intricate work may take a day or two. You'll handle it personally? Andromeda asked, her brow furrowing slightly. Yes, Dumbledore said. Harry's protection is of paramount importance, and time is of the essence. I will return tomorrow to complete the work. For tonight, the initial wards will suffice. Andromeda looked down at Harry, her expression softening. We'll protect him with everything we have. Nymphadora, standing in the background with her hair an eager shade of pink, chimed in, I'll help. I can babysit, keep him entertained, and teach him magic when he's old enough. Quote, a faint smile touched Andromeda's lips. Perhaps not just yet, Dora. Ted chuckled. You'll be a great big sister, though. Dumbledore's lips curved faintly before his expression grew somber once more. Thank you, both. Sirius intends to clear his name and take Harry into his care, but until that time, your home will be his refuge. Andromeda met his gaze with quiet strength. He's his family. By dawn the next day, Dumbledore returned to the Tonks' home, his wand already in hand. He spent the better part of the day layering the house with protections. With Andromeda and Ted assisting as much as they could, the home was soon cloaked in advanced charms, unplottability, anti-apparition wards, enchantments to repel hostile intent, and a Protega Totolu that would shield the household from both physical and magical intrusions. These spells will hold for now, Dumbledore said, lowering his wand and looking toward Andromeda and Ted. I will return periodically to reinforce and adjust them. However, should anything feel amiss, contact me immediately. Andromeda placed a hand on Harry's back, who was asleep in her arms. We'll keep watch, Professor. Peter Pettigrew skulked in a filthy alley, his watery eyes scanning the shadows for threats. The stench of refuse clung to the damp air, and every creak of the wind sent his heart racing. His wand trembled in his clammy hand, his mind replaying the same anxious mantra, Sirius is coming. He always comes. A sharp, cold voice shattered the silence. Hiding like the coward you are, Pettigrew. Peter spun around, his wand shaking as he pointed it at the source of the voice. From the shadows emerged Barty Crouch Jr., his gaunt face twisted into a gleeful sneer, his wild eyes gleaming with malice. The sight of him sent a chill racing down Peter's spine. Barty, Peter stammered, stumbling back a step. What are you doing here? Barty tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curling into a mocking smile. Checking on my dear comrade, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. It's not every day a loyal servant of the Dark Lord, one so trusted, ends up whimpering in the gutters. Peter flushed, clutching his wand tightly. You don't understand, Sirius. He's coming for me. I had no choice, Barty. The Dark Lord, Something happened I don't know if I hadn't. Spare me your excuses, Wormtail, Barty cut in. His voice sharp as a blade. He stepped closer, his wand loosely held at his side, though it radiated a faint, threatening energy. You think groveling justifies your betrayal of the Dark Lord. You handed over the Potters, didn't you? And now you can't even handle the consequences of your actions. Peter's breathing grew erratic. I did what I had to. I was never meant to fight. Voldemort knew that. He used me because I was disposable. Disposable. Barty's voice turned icy, his grin twisting into something darker. You're more than disposable, Pettigrew. You'll be useful then used right. And you'll continue to be until I decide otherwise. Peter flinched. What do you mean? Barty raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with mockery. Oh, Peter, do you think I came here to save your miserable hideout of loyalty? You're a tool. A coward's desperation can be very productive. His eyes gleamed dangerously. You're going to help me lay the groundwork for our Lord's return. Peter's jaw dropped. Voldemort, he's gone. Dead. You can't bring him back. Barty laughed, the sound harsh and grating. You think death is enough to destroy the Dark Lord? He'll rise again, Pettigrew. And I'll be there to serve him. The question is whether you'll serve willingly or be a corpse. Peter took a shaky step back, his breath catching. No, I need to get away. Sirius. Barty's grin widened. Ah, yes, your old friend, coming to avenge the Potters. I wonder how long you'll last against him. The distant roar of Sirius's motorbike interrupted them, growing louder with each passing second. Peter froze, his face paling. He's here, he whispered. Barty smirked, raising his wand lazily. Then you'd better run, Wormtail. Peter didn't need to be told twice. His form began to blur, shifting into the wiry shape of a rat, but before he could fully transform, Barty flicked his wand. Peter froze mid-shift, writhing in half-human agony as Barty turned toward the approaching noise. Sirius's motorbike skidded to a halt, the sound echoing through the alley. He leapt from the bike, wand drawn, his gray eyes blazing with fury. Pettigrew, he bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder. Show yourself, you spineless worm. Barty stepped forward, blocking Sirius's view of Peter. Always so dramatic, Black, he drawled. Though I suppose it suits you. Sirius's eyes narrowed, his wand snapping to point at Barty. Crouch, he spat. What are you doing with him? He betrayed James and Lily. He's mine. Oh, I know, Barty said with a grin. But I'm afraid I can't let you have him just yet. Sirius didn't wait for a reply. He fired a stunning spell, but Barty deflected it with ease, retaliating with a dark curse that Sirius barely dodged. The two wizards clashed in a flurry of spells, the alley lighting up with bursts of magic. Peter, still partially frozen by Barty's earlier spell, managed to shift fully into his rat form. He darted toward the shadows, his tiny bod, slipping through a crack in the wall as Sirius's curses rang out behind him. Sirius's focus shifted back to Barty, but another well-aimed hex from the Death Eater caught him off guard. He staggered, his wand slipping from his grasp as Barty advanced, his grin feral. You always were too reckless, Black, Barty sneered. With a flick of his wand, he sent Sirius crashing to the ground, his vision swimming. As the darkness closed in, the last thing Sirius saw was Barty's manic smile. Days passed, and Harry began to settle into the warmth of the Tonks household. Ted Tonks, a kind-hearted Muggle-born barrister, welcomed him with open arms. His natural empathy and humor helped Harry adapt to his new environment. Ted often joked that his legal training gave him an edge in negotiating bedtime with a toddler. And Harry seemed to sense the safety and love surrounding him. Andromeda and Ted agreed that Harry needed to grow up with the truth about his parents, the sacrifices James and Lily had made for him. Yet, for now, they focused on giving him a childhood filled with happiness and security. There would be time for difficult conversations when Harry was older. Nymphadora, though only 3 years his senior, embraced her role as a big sister with boundless enthusiasm. Her metamorphagus abilities delighted Harry, who giggled whenever her hair flashed between colors. Bubblegum Pink became his favorite, and Nymphadora often used her talent to entertain him, pulling faces and narrating whimsical stories. The house was filled with laughter and joy, but a quiet unease lingered. Sirius, had disappeared after leaving Harry with Dumbledore, and no news had reached the Tonks family. Old only assumed that he was still pursuing Peter Pettigrew, seeking justice for James and Lily. The uncertainty weighed on them, though they kept their worries hidden from Nymphadora and Harry. 5 days later, a loud, insistent tapping at the window interrupted their morning routine. Ted, who had been reading the Daily Prophet over a cup of tea, looked up to see a large Gringotts owl perched outside. A scroll, tied to its leg with a silver cord, glinted in the morning light. Andromeda crossed to the window and retrieved the scroll, her stomach tightening with a sense of foreboding. The owl flew off as soon as its burden was taken. Unrolling the parchment with trembling hands, she read the message aloud. To the family of Sirius Orion Black, as per the instructions left in his living will, we are obliged to inform you that Mr. Sirius Black has been incapacitated and is currently receiving treatment at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Due to injuries sustained in the line of action, Mr. Black remains comatose. Per his will, he has named Andromeda Tonks as Harry James Potter's legal guardian. Please visit Gringotts for further details. Andromeda's breath caught in her throat. Sensing her distress, Ted rose to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder. He's comatose, Ted murmured, his brow furrowing. What happened? Andromeda shook her head. I don't know, but he must have gone after Peter. It's the only thing that makes sense. She bit her lip, her mind racing. The war might be over, but there were still unanswered questions that had become more complicated now that Sirius was incapacitated. She folded the letter carefully and set it on the table, her resolve hardening. We'll take care of Harry, as Sirius wanted. But I need to know more. We'll visit Gringotts soon. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, Dumbledore sat at the head of the long table. In the Order of the Phoenix's meeting room, his face uncharacteristically grave. The usual twinkle in his eyes had faded, replaced by a deep, contemplative expression. As he addressed the gathered members of the Order, the air felt heavier, the room brimming with silent tension. I have been to the Department of Mysteries, Dumbledore began, his voice low and measured. The prophecy is no longer active. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. To his right, Minerva McGonagall leaned forward, her face pale with disbelief. You mean to say, it's gone? Dumbledore shook his head slightly. Not gone, Minerva, but inactive. It is as if the prophecy has lost its purpose. As far as the magical world is concerned, Voldemort is truly gone. A profound silence followed, the weight of his words sinking in. The idea that the prophecy no longer had meaning was unimaginable for many of them. And what of Harry? Remus Lupin asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the quiet tone betraying the tension beneath it. Is he truly safe? Dumbledore's expression softened. He is with Andromeda Tonks now. I trust she will raise him with the love and care he deserves. But as for his safety, only time will tell. Voldemort's hold over our world may be broken, but some shadows remain. There was a finality to Dumbledore's words that left the room in stunned silence. The victory they had won was palpable, but so was the cost. Friends lost, families shattered. The Order members glanced at one another, each lost in their thoughts as the gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air. We have won a great victory. Dumbledore continued softly, but at great cost. Dark forces never truly disappear. They simply bide their time, waiting for the right moment to return. The meeting was adjourned, and the members of the Order rose from their seats, filing out quietly, burdened by the knowledge that peace was fragile. As the room emptied, Dumbledore remained seated, his gaze distant. Remus, he called softly. Remus Lupin, who had begun to leave, turned back, his eyes hollow and tired. I'm afraid I must burden you with more bad news, Dumbledore said, his voice gentle but tinged with regret. What is it, Albus? Remus asked, though his voice was tinged with a quiet resignation. Dumbledore hesitated for a moment before speaking. I've been informed that Sirius has been admitted to St. Mungo's. He was gravely injured and has fallen into a coma. The healers are uncertain if he will wake, or if he ever will. Remus's face fell, his expression empty, eyes reflecting the 1,000-yard stare of a man who had lost too much. Without a word, he turned and left the room, disappearing into the night, unreachable for a long time to come. Dumbledore watched him go, then sank back into his chair, the weight of everything settling heavily on his shoulders. Though Voldemort was gone, his shadow lingered, his mad bid for power had scarred the very fabric of wizarding society. And though the Dark Lord had fallen, Dumbledore knew that the darkness he left behind had not yet faded. His influence, his legacy, would continue to linger in ways they could not yet foresee. Days turned into weeks, and life at the Tonks household settled into a comforting rhythm. Harry's presence brought an energy that neither Ted nor Andromeda had anticipated. Though he was still just a baby, there was something about him that seemed to brighten the house. Nymphadora, especially, took every opportunity to involve herself in Harry's care. Whether it was making faces at him to coax a giggle or reading her schoolbooks aloud in an exaggerated, dramatic voice, she became something of a big sister to him. Harry's laughter filled the house daily, his happiness a much-needed reprieve from the heavy burden of what had transpired on the night Voldemort was defeated. It was in these quiet moments, surrounded by the warmth and love of the Tonks family, that Harry seemed to thrive. Andromeda had a maternal energy that calmed even the most restless nights, and Ted's gentle patience added an extra layer of security. Harry, though too young to understand it, was growing up in a world far removed from terror and chaos that had claimed his parents. And yet, the outside world was not as peaceful as the Tonks household. The remnants of Voldemort's influence still lingered, though his physical presence had vanished. Whispers of his defeat circulated throughout the wizarding world, bringing both celebration and unease. Some believed that he was truly gone, defeated for good by a force that no one could yet explain. But others, those who had seen the depths of Voldemort's darkness, remained unconvinced. They feared that he might return, that somehow the darkness would find a way to claw its way back into their lives. In the meantime, Harry's safety was paramount. Andromeda took great care to ensure that nothing threatened the sanctuary they had built for him. Every morning, she checked the wards that Dumbledore had placed around their home, reinforcing them with her spells, determined to keep the darkness at bay. The house unplottable, its location a secret even from most of their friends. One particularly chilly evening, as light snow began to fall outside, Ted sat in the living room, reading aloud from the Daily Prophet. Harry, bundled up in a soft blanket, lay in Andromeda's arms, watching the flickering fire with wide, curious eyes. Nymphadora, sprawled out on the rug, her nose buried in her schoolwork, hummed softly to herself as she wrote in her textbook. The air was calm and peaceful, but the news Ted was reading carried with it a different tone. "It says here that Aurors are still trying to track down the last of the Death Eaters," Ted said, his voice low but steady. He glanced up at Andromeda, concern flickering in his eyes. "A few have gone into hiding, but there are reports of strange disappearances. They think some of them might be regrouping." Andromeda frowned, her grip on Harry tightening slightly. "Regrouping for what? Voldemort is gone." Ted nodded, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. "That's what they're saying. But there are still plenty of people who followed him, who believed in his Cowsey can carry on without him." A chill ran through the room, though it had little to do with the temperature outside. The idea that anyone could still be loyal to Voldemort, even after his defeat, was unsettling. Andromeda's mind immediately turned to the safety of her home, of Harry, and the wards she had painstakingly maintained since his arrival. No one would find them, she reminded herself. No one could breach the protections Dumbledore had placed on the house. But the nagging feeling of unease remained, no matter how many layers of magic she cast. Her mind remained focused on the thought of those still loyal to Voldemort. She knew that they could not become complacent, and they would need to remain vigilant in the months and years ahead. There was still much they did not understand about Voldemort's defeat, and until they knew the threat was gone, they could not afford to let their guard down. As the evening wore on, and the snow continued to fall, Andromeda tucked Harry into his crib, humming softly under her breath. The flickering light cast a warm glow across the room, and for a moment, all seemed well. Harry's tiny hand grasped at the air, his eyes slowly drifting shut as sleep claimed him. Andromeda watched him for a long while, her heart filled with a fierce protectiveness she hadn't expected to feel so strongly. "He's safe here," she whispered to herself. Repeating the words as if saying them aloud made them more real. "He's safe." Dumbledore visited less frequently. Winter months wore on, though he never fully disappeared from their lives. He kept close watch from a distance, ensuring that the protective wards remained in place and that the world's attention stayed far from Harry. The wizarding world, still adjusting to life after Voldemort, had largely forgotten about the boy who had survived. For now, that was exactly what Dumbledore wanted. Harry would be safer this way, hidden from the public eye, until the time was right. One crisp afternoon, after the first signs of spring had begun to show, Dumbledore arrived at the Tonks home unannounced. Andromeda, who had just finished reinforcing the wards, greeted him at the door with a small smile. "Albus," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you by?" Dumbledore's face was calm, though there was a weight behind his eyes that Andromeda recognized immediately. "I wanted to check on Harry," he said simply, his voice quiet. "And to speak with you about something unusual." Andromeda raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she led him into the living room. Harry, now a little more active, sat on the floor surrounded by colorful toys, babbling happily as Nymphadora played with him, shifting her appearance every few moments to make him laugh. Ted was out for the day, so it was just the three of them in the house. "He's growing quickly," Dumbledore noted with a small smile as he watched Harry. "He seems happy here." "He is," Andromeda replied, her tone filled with affection. "He's safe, and he's loved. That's all we can give him for now." Dumbledore nodded, his eyes lingering on the boy for a long moment. "There is something I must tell you, Andromeda," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "It's about the night Voldemort was defeated." Andromeda stiffened, her gaze locking onto Dumbledore's. "What about it?" Dumbledore sighed softly, folding his hands in front of him as he spoke. "I went to the Department of Mysteries not long after the events of that night. I needed to check on a prophecy, Harry's prophecy." "Harry has a prophecy, a true prophecy?" Andromeda asked, her brow furrowing. "Yes, he did, but not anymore," Dumbledore said, his voice grave. "The prophecy that foretold the fall of the Dark Lord. But when I went to check the orb, I found it in a state I did not expect. It hadn't shattered, as fulfilled prophecies usually do. Instead, it was inactive, as though something had interrupted the natural course of fate." Andromeda stared at him, confusion and concern warring on her face. "What does that mean, Albus?" "I am not entirely sure," Dumbledore admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty Andromeda rarely heard from him. "But it means that whatever happened the night Voldemort was destroyed, it was beyond the reach of prophecy as we understand it. Something disrupted the prophecy, something that should not have been possible." Andromeda glanced at Harry, her heart pounding in her chest. "And what does that mean for him?" "For now, it means that Harry is safe," Dumbledore said softly. "Voldemort is gone, at least I truly believe so. But whatever happened that night, it left a mark on Harry. A mark that I cannot fully comprehend yet. We must be vigilant, Andromeda. The war may be over, but the scars are far from healed." Andromeda's heart sank, but she nodded, her resolve strengthening. As Dumbledore left the house that day, Andromeda stood in the doorway, watching as the sun set behind him. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, but there was a weight in the air that she could not shake. Harry's future was uncertain, but for now, he was safe. And that, Andromeda knew, was the most important thing. Chapter 3. First Signs of Magic. The quiet, steady hum of life in the Tonks household had become the foundation of Harry's early years. Magic flowed through the home effortlessly, woven into the fabric of their daily routines, creating a sense of normalcy that was both familiar and foreign. From the moment Harry arrived, the Tonkses had ensured that their lives, though unremarkable on the surface, were filled with warmth and care. But despite their efforts to maintain a peaceful environment, the house was never truly ordinary, not with magic lacing the simplest of tasks, nor with Harry's presence bringing an unspoken sense of gravity to their home. As the months passed, Harry grew more curious about everything around him. His bright, inquisitive nature was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just that he was a sharp observer, picking up on the smallest details, it was how he interacted with the world, especially with magic. Andromeda noticed early on how his gaze would follow her wand movements when she performed household spells, his eyes narrowing in concentration as if he were trying to understand what she was doing, even though he couldn't yet speak. At first, the signs of Harry's magic were subtle, almost too faint to notice. It started small, objects like toys or books moving slightly out of place or lifting off the floor when no one was looking. Andromeda had seen similar things with Nymphadora when she was younger. Most magical children displayed signs of accidental magic before attending Hogwarts, especially when they were excited or upset. But with Harry, it was different. The magic was not accidental. It was deliberate, focused, as though he was already beginning to grasp some subconscious control over it. It began innocently enough. One quiet afternoon, while Andromeda was in the kitchen preparing lunch, Nymphadora lay sprawled on the living room floor, her schoolwork forgotten as she entertained Harry. Now a little older, Y had developed a habit of reaching out toward objects that interested him. On this particular day, a small stuffed dragon toy that had rolled out of his reach caught his attention. Without a single word, his tiny hand stretched toward it, and the toy slowly slid across the floor toward him, as if guided by an invisible force. Nymphadora, used to her own accidental magic as a child, barely glanced at the moving toy. But Andromeda, watching from the doorway, felt a ripple of unease pass through her. She had seen this before, children performing magic unknowingly, but what unnerved her was the calm control with which Harry seemed to do it. As the days passed, the instances became more frequent. It wasn't long before Harry's actions became more deliberate. He wasn't just pulling toys toward him, or causing objects to move randomly, he was directing the magic with a quiet, startling precision. One evening, as Ted sat in the living room reading the evening edition of the Daily Prophet, Harry's at a teacup resting on the table. Andromeda, seated beside Ted, noticed the subtle shift in Harry's posture. His green eyes, bright and focused, seemed to lock onto the cup, and before anyone could react, the cup lifted into the air, hovering gently before floating toward Harry, who was babbling contentedly in his crib. Ted glanced over the top of his newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "Well, would you look at that," he said with a chuckle. "Our little Harry's got quite the knack for magic already." Andromeda, however, didn't share Ted's amusement. Slowly, she stood and placed the cup back on the table, her thoughts racing. "It's too controlled," she said softly, her eyes never leaving Harry. "This isn't just accidental magic, Ted. It's purposeful. He's directing it." Ted folded the paper and set it aside, carefully watching her. "Are you sure? Dora used to do things like that all the time when she was younger." Andromeda shook her head. "No, this is different. When Dora did it, her magic was chaotic and unrefined. She had no control over it. But Harry, he's focused, aware of what he's doing, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet." Ted frowned, leaning forward in his chair. "Are you saying you think he's doing it on purpose?" "I don't know," Andromeda admitted, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I know it's different from what we've seen in Nymphadora. We need to be careful, Ted. If this continues, we can't let anyone outside the house know about it." Ted sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Do you think someone would come looking for him? I mean, the war's over. Voldemort's gone. What could anyone want with Harry now?" Andromeda didn't answer right away. Instead, her gaze drifted back to the sleeping boy, her heart heavy with unspoken fears. "He's tied to the prophecy, Ted. We don't fully understand what happened that night. His magic, it's not just ordinary. It's something more, and if we can sense it, so can others." Ted stood and placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression serious. "We'll protect him," he said firmly. "Dumbledore's wards are stronger than anything I've ever seen. No one's going to find him here." She nodded, though her mind remained troubled. Harry's magic was growing stronger by the day, and with it came an unsettling realization. If they weren't careful, someone would eventually notice. One who might not have the best intentions. Late that night, after the house had settled into a deep quiet, Dumbledore arrived without warning. The soft sound of Fox's wings brushing the cool night air signaled his presence before Andromeda even opened the door. She greeted him with a tired smile, stepping aside to let him in. His visits had become less frequent in recent months, but whenever he appeared, there was always an air of purpose around him. "Good evening, Andromeda," Dumbledore said, his voice low but kind. "I trust everything is well." She led him into the living room, where Ted was sitting, his brow furrowed with concern. "We've noticed something," Andromeda began, her tone cautious. "It's about Harry." Dumbledore's eyes flickered with interest, though his expression remained unreadable. "Go on." "He's showing signs of magic," Andromeda continued. "But it's controlled. Too controlled for someone his age." Dumbledore's calm demeanor did not falter, but Andromeda could see the sharp focus in his eyes. "How often has this been happening?" he asked. "Almost every day," Ted replied, his voice low. "It's not just accidental magic. He's moving things, lifting objects. It's like he knows what he's doing, even though he's too young to understand." Dumbledore nodded slowly, deep in thought. "It is not entirely unexpected," he said after a pause. "Harry's connection to magic is deeper than most. The night he survived Voldemort's curse was not just a result of his mother's sacrifice. His magic is tied to something far greater." Andromeda's concern deepened. "Is this something we should be worried about?" Dumbledore's gaze softened. "It is not something to fear, but something to be mindful of. Harry's magic will continue to grow, and with it, his control. We must ensure that it remains undetected by those who might seek to use him for their own purposes." Ted sat forward, frowning. "So what do we do? We can't just hope no one notices." "No," Dumbledore agreed. "We cannot. I will then the wards around the house to mask his magical signature. That should keep him hidden from unwanted attention for the time being." Andromeda nodded, though a lingering tension remained in her chest. "And what about when he's older? When he goes to Hogwarts?" Dumbledore smiled faintly. "By then, Harry will have learned to control his magic more fully. We will guide him, and prepare him for the challenges ahead. But for now, he is safe here, with you." Dumbledore left the house that night, and the same unspoken worry filled the air. Harry's magic was growing stronger, and with it the potential for danger. But for now, he was safe. For now, he was just a boy, surrounded by love and protection. In the days that followed Dumbledore's visit, Andromeda noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere of their home. The additional wards Dumbledore had placed around the house seemed to give her a temporary sense of peace, but it was fragile. The more she watched Harry, the more she realized that his magic wasn't just growing stronger, it was becoming more complex. Where most magical children act on instinct, Harry was already beginning to show signs of something else, something more purposeful. One afternoon, while Andromeda was folding laundry in the kitchen, she heard Nymphadora's voice floating in from the living room. "Harry, come on, you can do it," she said, her tone encouraging yet playful. Andromeda, curious, set the basket of clothes aside and quietly moved toward the doorway. Nymphadora sat cross-legged on the floor, her face full of concentration as she stared at a pile of building blocks. Harry, barely a toddler, was watching intently, his brow furrowed as if mimicking her expression. And then, slowly but surely, one of the blocks began to levitate, hovering just a few inches off the ground. Andromeda's breath caught in her throat. "There you go," Nymphadora cheered. Just like that. The block wobbled slightly in the air before dropping back down, Harry's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and pride. He clapped his hands, a toothy grin spreading across his face. Andromeda stepped into the room, her voice soft but firm. "Dora, what are you doing?" Nymphadora looked up, guilt flashing across her features. "I was just showing Harry how to use magic. And you thought that encouraging him to levitate blocks was a good idea." Andromeda crossed her arms. Her tone was more concerned than angry. "He's good at it, Mum," Nymphadora replied defensively. "It's not like he's doing anything dangerous. He just wanted to try." Andromeda sighed, kneeling beside her daughter. "I know you mean well, Dora, but Harry's magic isn't like yours was at his age. It's stronger, more controlled." Nymphadora's expression softened. "But that's good, isn't it?" said, confused. "Doesn't that mean he's special?" Andromeda hesitated, her gaze shifting to Harry, who was now babbling happily to himself, completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "It means he's special, but it also means we have to be careful. If people knew how strong his magic was already." Nymphadora frowned. "You mean, they'd want to hurt him?" "Not everyone, but there are people out there who might," Andromeda explained. People who are still loyal to Voldemort. People who might think they can use Harry's magic for their own purposes. Nymphador's eyes widened. But Dumbledore's wards. The wards are strong, but we still need to be cautious, Andromeda said gently. Harry's and our safety depends on it. Nymphadora nodded, her face full of understanding. I won't teach him anything else, she promised. I just thought. I don't know, maybe it'd help him learn. Shoulder. I know you're just trying to help. But let's leave the magical lessons for when Harry's a bit older, alright? Quote. With a final nod from Nymphadora, Andromeda turned back to Harry. He was staring up at her with wide, curious eyes as if sensing the seriousness of the conversation. She knelt beside him, brushing a hand through his messy black hair. You'll have plenty of time to learn magic, Harry, she whispered. But for now, let's take things one step at a time. That evening, after the house had quieted and Harry was tucked into his crib, Andromeda and Ted sat together in the kitchen, their faces lined with the worry they tried to keep hidden from their children. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long shadows across the walls. Ted, Andromeda began, her voice barely above a whisper, I think we need to talk about Sirius. Ted, staring into the fire, blinked and turned toward her. Sirius, what about him? I've been thinking about what Dumbledore said, about keeping Harry's magic hidden, Andromeda said, her brow furrowing. If we're going to protect Harry, we need Sirius as safe too. He's still Harry's godfather, and despite all that has happened, he'd want to be here for him. Ted sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, but Sirius isn't exactly available right now. Andromeda's chest tightened at the reminder. After the night Voldemort fell, Sirius had gone after Peter Pettigrew, determined to bring the traitor to justice. But it had been a trap, and Sirius had barely escaped with his life. He had been found unconscious, gravely injured, and was now in a deep coma, hidden away in a secure location by the Order of the Phoenix. He healers were unsure if or when he would wake. He deserves to know what's happening with Harry, Andromeda whispered, her voice filled with emotion. But if he never wakes up, Ted placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. He will. Sirius is tough. He'll pull through. Andromeda nodded, though doubt still lingered in her heart. Sirius had always been the reckless one, always charging headfirst into danger without a second thought. But now, with him in a coma, Harry had lost the one person who might have been able to guide him through the challenges that lay ahead. We'll keep him safe, Ted said firmly, sensing her unease. We'll do everything we can to protect Harry until Sirius wakes up. And when he does, we support them both. Andromeda smiled faintly, grateful for Ted's unwavering support. She knew they were doing everything they could to keep Harry safe, but the uncertainty of the future weighed heavily on her mind. Voldemort may have been gone, but his followers were still out there, waiting for their moment to strike. And the more Harry's magic grew, the more vulnerable they became. Later that night, after Harry had been put to bed and the house had quieted, Dumbledore arrived unannounced. Heralded by the soft flutter of Fawkes's wings as the phoenix settled gracefully on the windowsill. Andromeda greeted him at the door, her expression weary but composed. Albus, she said, stepping aside to let him in. It's late. Is everything all right? Dumbledore offered a gentle smile, though his eyes held a hint of concern. I sensed a surge of a unique magic signature. I thought it best to check in. She led him into the living room where Ted sat, his brow furrowed. It's Harry, Andromeda began quietly. He's showing signs of magic, but it's unlike anything we've seen before. It's too controlled for a child his age. Dumbledore's gaze softened. Tell me more. He's performing deliberate magic, Ted explained. Objects move toward him as if he wills it. It's not accidental outbursts, it's focused. Andromeda wrung her hands, her anxiety evident. I'm worried, Albus. If his magic continues like this, someone might sense it. Worse, if we try to get Harry to stop doing it as much. Could he become an obscurial? Dumbledore met her gaze steadily. Your concern is entirely understandable, Andromeda, but rest assured, Harry will not become an obscurial. Obscuri. ALS form under the most extreme circumstances, typically when a child's magic is forcibly repressed through fear and abuse. Here, Harry is loved and nurtured. The chance of him becoming an obscurial in such a caring environment is virtually impossible. He offered a reassuring smile. What I'm proposing is a form of gentle containment, not suppression. She frowned slightly. But using a magical de-ampening device, won't that hinder his development? Not at all, Dumbledore assured her. The band I have in mind is commonly used in countries where wands aren't the primary focus of magical education. And children often display more accidental magic. While Harry's case is unique, the band will simply reduce the intensity of his outward magical manifestations. It won't block his connection to magic or impede his growth. Think of it as a filter, allowing his magic to flow freely within him until he's mature enough to control it consciously. Andromeda took a deep breath, considering his words. So it won't suppress his abilities. Just manage them. Exactly, Dumbledore confirmed. Harry's magic will continue to develop naturally. The band ensures that his accidental magic doesn't draw unwanted attention, keeping him safe without stifling his potential. She nodded slowly, relief beginning to soften her features. Thank you, Albus. Your reassurance means a great deal. He inclined his head gently. Harry is fortunate to have guardians who care so deeply for his well-being. Together, we'll ensure he has the freedom to grow and the protection he needs. Ted glanced at Andromeda before speaking. We just want to keep him safe, both from external threats and from any unintended consequences of his power. And you will, Dumbledore said firmly. This is a temporary measure. Once he's mature enough to understand and control his abilities, the band can be removed without any adverse effects. Andromeda took a deep breath. I just don't want him to feel restrained or for his magic to turn inward. He won't, Dumbledore replied gently. An obscurus forms under extreme emotional distress when a child is forced to hide their magic out of fear. Harry knows he's loved. He feels safe here. The band is simply a tool to help manage his extraordinary abilities. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. All right, if you're certain it won't harm him. I give you my word, Dumbledore said solemnly. Dumbledore stood, his expression calm but purposeful. I'll retrieve the band. It wasn't long before Dumbledore returned, his hand holding a small, simple-looking bracelet. The band was made of a soft, silver metal that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. It was unadorned, save for a few delicate runes etched into its surface, runes that Andromeda recognized as symbols of balance, manas, and protection, alges. Together, they approached Harry's crib. The boy slept peacefully, his tiny hand clutching a stuffed toy. Dumbledore carefully slipped the bracelet onto his wrist. The runes glowed briefly before settling, the band appearing as no more than a simple accessory. Andromeda watched anxiously. Will he feel any different? No, Dumbledore assured her. He'll be the same joyful child he always is. This will just help keep his magic from drawing unwanted attention. She exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you, Albus. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You are doing a wonderful job caring for him. Remember, you are not alone in this. Ted stepped forward. We appreciate your guidance. It's a relief to know there's a plan. Dumbledore nodded. I'll retune the wards around your home as an alert to any unusual magic Harry might do. But for now, rest easy. Harry is safe. As he prepared to leave, Andromeda voiced one last concern. If his magic continues to grow, and the band becomes insufficient, what then? Then we'll address it together, Dumbledore replied. But I have faith that, with your support and love, Harry will learn to manage his abilities. In time, he may achieve. Dumbledore departed, the house settled into a tranquil silence. Andromeda stood by Harry's crib, watching the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. The silver band gleamed softly on his wrist, a silent guardian of his future. I hope we're doing the right thing, she whispered. Ted joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. We are. He's safe. And that's what matters. She leaned into him. I just can't shake the fear of him becoming an obscurial. He won't, Ted said confidently. He's surrounded by love. That's what makes the difference. Andromeda nodded, allowing herself a small smile. You're right. We'll get through this. In the days that followed, the household found a new equilibrium. Harry's magical incidents became less frequent and less intense. He remained a cheerful and inquisitive child, blissfully unaware of the precautions taken to protect him. Nymphadora, ever energetic, continued to play with her cousin. delighting in showing off her metamorphagus talents to make him laugh. The bond between them grew stronger, a testament to the loving environment that enveloped them all. Omeda watched these moments with a renewed sense of hope. While the world outside was fraught with uncertainties and lingering shadows, within their home, there was warmth, laughter, and the promise of a brighter future. Far beyond their haven, whispers of unrest continued to ripple through the wizarding world. But for now, Harry was shielded from those dangers, allowing the innocence of childhood for just a while longer. And as the sun set each evening, casting a golden glow through the windows, Andromeda found solace in the simple truth: they were doing everything they could to protect him. And with Dumbledore's reassurances echoing in her mind, she dared to believe that they were on the right path. Several weeks passed, and life in the Tonks household continued its familiar rhythm. Harry's magical outbursts, while still controlled, became less frequent, thanks in part to the bracelet Dumbledore had provided. The enchanted band, a small silver bracelet etched with protective runes, gently dampened Harry's magical signature, preventing any large bursts of magic. While it didn't completely suppress his abilities, it helped to keep his powers in check, at least for now. Andromeda noticed that Harry still seemed attuned to the magic around him. Even with the bracelet, there were moments when objects would shift slightly or flicker in response to his moods. It wasn't dangerous, but it was a constant reminder of just how powerful he would become. One particularly quiet morning, as Andromeda stood by the window watching the sunrise, she heard a soft knock at the door. Her heart jumped. It was rare for them to have visitors, especially with the wards in place. She moved swiftly toward the door, her wand slipping into her hand as a precaution. Opening the door cautiously, she was met by the familiar, weary face of Remus Lupin. His robes were frayed at the edges, and there was a haunted look in his eyes, but his smile was warm and genuine. "Remus," Andromeda said, her shoulders relaxing as she tucked her wand away. "This is a surprise. Is everything all right?" He offered a tired nod. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, Andromeda. I just needed to see him. And I wanted to check on you all." His gaze flickered past her momentarily. "I've heard about Sirius." She stepped aside to let him in. "Come in. You look exhausted." "Traveling tends to take its toll," he admitted, entering the cozy living room. Harry was on the floor, surrounded by a scatter of toys, his emerald eyes alight with curiosity as he examined a spinning top. Remus's expression softened as he watched the boy. "He looks so much like James," he murmured, a hint of melancholy in his voice. "But those are definitely Lily's eyes." Andromeda nodded, observing Harry with a mix of affection and concern. "He's growing fast. And his magic. It's remarkable, Remus. Sometimes I worry it's too much for a child his age." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Dumbledore mentioned that his survival wasn't just about Lily's protection. There's a power in him, something even Voldemort couldn't comprehend." He paused, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing heavily upon him. "I wish I could stay, help you watch over him." She glanced at him, noticing the lines of worry etched deeper into his face. "What's stopping you?" A bitter smile tugged at his lips. "The Ministry is cracking down on anyone they deem undesirable. Werewolves aren't exactly high on their list of acceptable citizens. Every day, it's a risk just being in Britain. I can't put you or Harry in danger by staying." Andromeda reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You know you're always welcome here. The wards would keep you safe." He shook his head slowly. "I appreciate it, truly. But it's not just about safety. Out there, I might be able to find others like me, build alliances, and gather information. Maybe even find a way to improve things for when Harry grows up." His eyes met hers, filled with a mix of determination and sorrow. "It's just hard to leave. Feels like I'm abandoning what's left of my family." "You're not abandoning anyone," she assured him gently. "You're doing what you think is best. And perhaps you're right. Maybe out there, you can make a difference." Remus looked back at Harry, who had now noticed their presence and was gazing up at them with innocent curiosity. "I just don't want him to grow up in a world as broken as this," he said softly. "James and Lily gave everything to make it better. I owe it to them to keep fighting, in whatever way I can." Andromeda smiled sadly. "We all do. And we'll keep him safe here. You have my word." He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. Thank you. That means more than you know. He hesitated before adding, if you ever need anything at all, send word. I'll find a way to help. Take care of yourself, Remus. Send an owl every once in a while, she said, squeezing his arm lightly. The world needs good men like you. As he prepared to leave, the weight of his decision seemed to press down on him. He lingered at the doorway, casting one last look back at Harry. Tell him about us when he's older, he whispered. About the Marauders. About how much we all loved him. I will, Andromeda promised. He'll know. A faint smile crossed his face. Goodbye, Andromeda. Until we meet again, she replied softly. He stepped out into the crisp morning air, pulling his worn cloak tighter around himself. The sky was overcast, a gray mirror to the turmoil he felt. Each step away from the house felt heavier than the last. Walking down the path, Remus fought the urge to turn back. The isolation he faced was a familiar companion, yet the prospect of leaving behind the last tangible connection to his dearest friends made it almost unbearable. But he knew staying was not an option. The Ministry's hunt for scapegoats had intensified. Werewolves, even those who had fought against Voldemort, were being targeted. His presence could bring unwanted attention to the Tonks family and, by extension, Harry. He clenched his fists inside his pockets. The world he once knew was crumbling, and the ideals he and his friends had fought for seemed more distant than ever. But giving in to despair wasn't an option. For Harry's sake, he had to keep going. As he reached the end of the lane, a gust of wind swept past, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea. Remus paused, closing his eyes. Memories of laughter and camaraderie flooded his mind. James's mischievous grin, Sirius's boisterous laughter, even flashes of Peter's eager nods, and Lily's bright, understanding eyes. They had once believed in a better future, and he couldn't let that belief die with them. Stay safe, he whispered into the wind, hoping the words would somehow reach Harry. Back at the house, Andromeda watched from the window as Remus's figure grew smaller. She could almost feel the weight of his loneliness, the burden he carried. She pained her to see a good man but she understood his reasons. The world was not kind to those who were different, and Remus had suffered more than most. Who was that? A soft voice asked. She too. RNED to see Nymphadora standing in the doorway, her hair a subdued shade of brown. An old friend, Andromeda replied. Someone who cares a great deal about Harry. Her daughter stepped closer, her eyes searching her mother's face. He looked sad. Andromeda nodded. He has a heavy burden. But he's doing what he thinks is right. Nymphadora glanced out the window. Do you think things will ever get better, Mum? I hope so, Andromeda said softly. For all our sakes. They stood in silence for a moment, mother and daughter, both lost in their own thoughts. Then, with a small sigh, Andromeda turned away from the window. Come on, let's see what trouble your little cousin is getting into. Nymphadora smiled faintly, probably trying to make his toys fly again. Well, at least he keeps us on our toes, Andromeda replied. A hint of amusement in her voice. As they walked back to the living room, the sound of Harry's laughter echoed through the house. It was a small beacon of joy amidst the uncertainty. A reminder of what they were all fighting for. Andromeda watched as Nymphadora joined Harry on the floor, her hair shifting to a bright turquoise that made the young boy giggle with delight. Despite everything, there was still hope, and as long as they held on to that, perhaps Remus's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of so many others, would not be in vain. Chapter 4. Learning Patience. By the time Harry turned 6, his world had grown larger and more complex than he could have imagined. His boundless curiosity, particularly when it came to magic, had only sharpened with age. Though still young, Harry's hunger to understand the world around him, especially the magical one, had become the driving force in his life. Ted and Andromeda Tonks encouraged his curiosity, though carefully, knowing the extraordinary power that lay within the boy. But there were limits, one of which sat snugly on Harry's wrist in the form of a small, silver band. A band he had started to notice more and more as his own awareness of magic grew. Dora, at 11 years old, was on the cusp of attending Hogwarts and was already receiving lessons from a tutor her parents had hired to prepare her for the magical challenges ahead. She relished the chance to practice spells at home, often sneaking Harry into her lessons or showing him new tricks she had learned. Although her metamorphagus abilities fascinated Harry, it was the way Dora interacted with magic that truly captured his attention. One quiet afternoon, Dora sat at the kitchen table, her tutor, a stern-looking woman with spectacles perched on the end of her nose, droning on about the fundamentals of transfiguration. Harry sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, his green eyes watching everything intently as the tutor explained the complexities of transforming inanimate objects. Dora, the fidgety student, twirled her wand in her hand while occasionally throwing glances at Harry, who was getting visibly restless. The tutor sighed, pushing her glasses up. "Nymphadora, you must focus. If you continue to twirl your wand like that, you'll find yourself turning your quills into something far more dangerous." Dora snorted, though she stopped twirling her wand. Harry smirked. He liked how Dora didn't take things too seriously, even if the tutor did. After what felt like an eternity, the tutor dismissed Dora for the day, reminding her that Hogwarts would expect more discipline. Dora rolled her eyes as the woman dissipated with a soft pop, leaving behind the faintest shimmer of magic in the air. As soon as she was gone, Dora slouched in her chair, spinning her wand in defiance once again. "Blimey, how am I supposed to learn if she keeps droning on like that?" Dora muttered, catching Harry's curious gaze. "You could just practice," Harry suggested, his small voice cutting through the room. Dora grinned. "Yeah, but where's the fun in that?" Harry shuffled over, sitting next to her, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the silver band around his wrist. He glanced at it, frowning. "Why do I have to wear this?" Dora, noticing his fixation, shrugged. "It helps you, doesn't it? I think it's supposed to, keep your magic from getting out of control." Harry's brow furrowed, his fingers tugging at the band. "But I don't want it to. I want to use my magic, like you." Dora leaned down, her face softening. "Harry, you're doing magic, just in smaller ways. You've done it before, even without a wand." She waggled hers playfully. "Most kids our age can't even manage that. I want to do more, though," Harry insisted, his tone edging toward petulance. "I can feel it inside me, Dora. But the band, it stops it." For a moment, Dora said nothing, her gaze flicking to the band around Harry's wrist. She remembered when Dumbledore had given it to him, explaining how it would protect Harry from the overwhelming force of his own magic. But at 6 years old, Harry didn't see it that way. To him, it was a restraint. "Maybe you should ask Mum," Dora suggested, glancing toward the kitchen where Andromeda was tidying up. "She'll explain it better than I can." Harry hesitated, but curiosity and frustration won out. He climbed to his feet, marching over to Andromeda with determination. "Mum," he said, his voice more demanding than usual. "Why do I have to wear this?" He held up his wrist, the silver band glinting in the afternoon light. "It stops my magic." Andromeda, who had sensed this question coming for some time, set down the dish she was washing and wiped her hands on a towel. Her expression was calm but serious as she knelt to meet Harry's eye level. "I know it feels unfair, Harry," she began gently, her hands resting on his shoulders. "But the band doesn't stop your magic, it just helps you control it." "But I don't need it," Harry insisted, his lips pressing into a stubborn line. "I can do it by myself." "I know you can," Andromeda said with a small smile. "But your magic is very powerful, Harry. More powerful than most wizards your age. The band is there to make sure that power doesn't get too big too quickly." Harry frowned, glancing down at the band. "But why can't I just learn like everyone else? Like Dora?" Andromeda's gaze softened. "You will, Harry, but you're a little different. Your magic is special. It's strong, and sometimes it can be hard to control, especially when you're upset or frustrated. This band just helps make sure you stay safe." Harry's face scrunched up in thought. "Safe from what?" Andromeda hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "From yourself, sometimes. Magic can be tricky. Without control, it can do things we don't want it to do. The band doesn't stop you from doing magic, it just makes sure it happens when you're ready for it." Harry studied her face, trying to make sense of the explanation. He still didn't like it, but he trusted Andromeda. Finally, after a long pause, he sighed. "Okay, but I'm going to be really good at magic one day." Andromeda smiled, brushing a lock of his messy hair away from his face. Of that, I have no doubt. In the passing months, Harry grew more accustomed to the band, though his frustration with its limitations still lingered. Whenever he watched Dora practice magic with her tutor, the itch to perform magic himself gnawed at him. It didn't seem fair. Dora could already make objects float with a flick of her wand, while Harry struggled to control even the simplest bursts of magic without the band tightening its hold. One particularly chilly afternoon, as the leaves turned from green to orange, Harry sat in the back garden, watching Dora's tutor demonstrate basic charms. The tutor, a strict woman with hair pulled tightly into a bun, was lecturing Dora on the importance of precise incantations. Swish and flick, the tutor instructed, demonstrating with her wand. Like this. Now, you try. Dora mimicked the motion, and the feather in front of her floated gracefully into the air. Though Harry sat nearby, sulking. What's the matter, Harry? Dora asked, noticing his sour expression. Harry huffed. I want to do it. You will, one day, Dora said encouragingly, twirling her wand. Once you're old enough for Hogwarts, you'll be casting spells left and right. I can do it now, Harry muttered under his breath, his fingers tugging at the band around his wrist. Dora gave him a sympathetic look, but her tutor frowned. Nymphadora, the tutor chided, it's important to focus. Hogwarts won't tolerate such distractions. Dora rolled her eyes, but her tutor's sternness seemed to catch Harry's attention. He fell silent, watching the tutor closely as she walked Dora through the basics of magical theory. Later that evening, after the tutor had left, Harry sat at the kitchen table with Ted. W.H.O. was reading the evening edition of the Daily Prophet. Ted, sensing Harry's quiet frustration, glanced over the top of his newspaper. What's on your mind, Harry? Ted asked, folding the paper and setting it aside. Harry frowned, staring at the silver band. Why can't I just take it off? Ted raised an eyebrow. The band. Harry nodded. I know it's supposed to help, but I want to try magic without it. I want to be like Dora. Ted leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You will be, one day. But for now, that band is helping you control your magic. But it doesn't feel like it, Harry protested. It feels like it's holding me back. Ted chuckled softly. I know it seems that way. But think of it like this. Right now, your magic is like an overflowing river that's overflowing. The band helps guide that river, making sure it doesn't spill over and cause a flood. Harry blinked, trying to picture it. So, it's not stopping my magic. Just guiding it. Exactly, Ted said, nodding. And one day, when you're ready, you won't need the band. You'll have learned how to control the magic on your own. Harry considered this, his frustration easing slightly. Do you think I'll be really good at it? Ted smiled warmly. I think you'll be better than anyone can imagine. As the weeks passed, Harry continued to watch Dora's lessons with growing interest. Though he still yearned to cast spells like she did, he was beginning to understand the importance of control. The band no longer felt like a restriction, but rather a reminder that magic required patience and discipline. Dora, ever the mischievous older sister figure, still pushed Harry's limits whenever they were alone in the garden. She would tease him about his future at Hogwarts, promising to show him all the acre passageways and tricks she had learned. You'll be a natural, she told him one afternoon, her hair shifting from orange to blue. You'll probably outdo me in no time. Harry smiled at the thought. He could picture it, wand in hand, casting spells with ease, mastering magic just as Ted and Andromeda had taught him. But for now, he had to wait. Wait until the time came when the silver band was no longer needed. And he could truly let his magic soar. As the days shortened and the crisp bite of autumn deepened, Harry found himself spending more time indoors, wrapped in the warmth of the Tonks household. But despite the comforting routine of life with Ted, Andromeda, and Dora, Harry's mind often wandered to places far beyond the walls of their home. At 6 years old, Harry was beginning to experience emotions and thoughts that seemed out of place for someone his age. Though he couldn't explain it, there were moments when he felt far older than his years, as if there was something in him that shaped the way he saw the world. It wasn't just his keen sense of observation or his thirst for knowledge, it was something deeper, a quiet pulse that thrummed beneath the surface of his mind. always present but never fully understood. Late one evening, long after Andromeda had put him to bed, Harry lay in the dark, staring up at the ceiling. The house was quiet, save for the soft ks of the old wooden floors and the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. Normally, Harry would have drifted off to sleep by now, but tonight his mind was restless. His thoughts churned with questions he couldn't answer, questions about the silver band, about his magic, and about the strange sense of unease that sometimes bubbled up inside him. The scar on his forehead tingled faintly, a sensation he had grown used to over the years. He absent-mindedly rubbed it, his small fingers tracing the lightning bolt shape etched into his skin. It was the only part of his past that seemed connected to a life he couldn't remember, a life that, for now, existed only in fragments and whispers. There were times when Harry felt as though the scar was more than just a mark. It had a weight to it, not physically, but in a way that lingered in the back of his mind. Sometimes, when he was deep in thought, he would catch fleeting images, flickers of things he didn't quite understand, like dreams just out of reach. A flash of green light, a shadowy figure, voices that didn't belong to anyone he knew. The moments were brief, always slipping away before he could grasp them, but they left behind a strange sense of knowing. A maturity that felt out of place in a boy so young. Sighing, Harry rolled over in bed, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. He didn't talk about these feelings with anyone, not even Ted or Andromeda. It wasn't that he didn't trust them, it was just that he didn't know how to explain it. How could he put into words the strange sensation that sometimes gripped him, the feeling that something inside him was waiting to be understood? The next morning, Harry woke to the smell of breakfast cooking with Ted whistling softly in the kitchen. He climbed out of bed, rubbed his eyes, and padded down the hall to find Dora sitting at the table, digging into a plate of toast and eggs. "Morning, sleepyhead," Dora teased, her hair a vivid shade of purple today. "You missed M's lecture about the importance of punctuality." Harry smiled sleepily as he sat down at the table. "She gives you those all the time." "That she does," Dora agreed with a smirk. "But one day, I'll be on time for something. And it'll blow her mind." Andromeda, who was standing by the stove, gave Dora a pointed look, though there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. "If that day ever comes, I'll believe we've truly witnessed a miracle." Quote. Ted chuckled, setting a fresh plate of eggs on the table. "Not likely, but a miracle indeed." As the conversation flowed around him, Harry picked at his food, his mind drifting once again to the silver band around his wrist. He had been thinking about it all night, turning over Andromeda's words in his mind. Control, safety, those were the reasons he wore it. But even though he understood why the band was necessary, a small part of him resented it. "Harry, you all right?" Ted asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on his face. Harry blinked, pulled from his thoughts. "Yeah, I'm fine, just thinking about magic." "No doubt," Ted said with a knowing smile. "You've got the look of someone plotting their next spell." Harry smiled faintly, though the weight of his thoughts hadn't lifted. He glanced at the band again, the faint shimmer of runes catching the morning light. "How long do I have to wear this?" he asked quietly, his voice more thoughtful than demanding this time. Ted and Andromeda exchanged a brief glance. Andromeda set her cup of tea down and turned to Harry, her expression soft. "For as long as you need it, Harry. It's not a pun, Ishment. It's just a way to make sure your magic doesn't overwhelm you." Harry looked down at his plate, thinking. He knew they meant well. Ted, Andromeda, even Dumbledore, they were all trying to protect him. But it still didn't feel fair. Why did he need so much protection? Why was his magic so different from Dora's or anyone else's? Later that afternoon, after Dora's tutoring session had ended, Harry wandered out to the garden, seeking the solace of the open air. The sky was overcast, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the property. Harry liked it out here, away from the lessons and lectures, where he could let his mind wander. As he stood there, watching the clouds roll by, a thought struck him, one that had been lingering at the edges of his mind for days. What if he tried to use his magic without the band's help? Just once, to see what it felt like. He had felt his magic stirring beneath the surface before, like a river trying to break free of a dam. What if he let it flow, just for a moment? Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, Harry held out his hand, focusing on a small rock that lay on the ground a few feet away. He could feel the magic bubbling up inside him, that strange, instinctive power that had always been there. Slowly, he reached out with his mind, willing the rock to rise. At first, nothing happened. The rock remained still, unmoving in the grass. But then, as Harry focused harder, he felt the familiar tug of magic beneath his skin. The rock wobbled, then slowly lifted into the air, hovering just above the ground. Harry's heart raced with excitement. He had done it. He had used magic, without the band's help. But even as the triumph surged through him, a strange sensation followed. It wasn't like the usual thrill of casting a spell. It was primal, heavier, as if something else had stirred alongside his magic. His scar tingled. The rock suddenly shot into the air, much faster than Harry had intended, before falling back down with a heavy thud. Startled, Harry stumbled backwards, clutching his forehead as a faint ache pulsed from his scar. "Harry!" A voice called from behind him. He turned to see Andromeda standing at the back door. Her expression a mix of concern and something else, something closer to fear. "What were you doing?" she asked, striding toward him. Harry bit his lip, glancing down at the rock. I was just practicing." Andromeda knelt beside him, her eyes searching his face. "Are you all right? Your scar?" Harry hesitated, touching his forehead where the tingle had faded. "It's fine. I'm fine." Andromeda didn't seem convinced, but she nodded slowly. "Let's get you inside." That evening, as Harry lay in bed, the memory of the day's events played over in his mind. The feeling he had experienced when his magic surged, the way his scar had ached, had left him unsettled. It hadn't been like the times he practiced magic with Dora or Ted. This had felt different, like a part of him he didn't fully understand had taken over. Just for a moment, and though the sensation had passed, it left behind a quiet question in his mind, one that he couldn't shake. Why did he have this scar? Why did it feel like there was something more to it than just the mark of a curse? As the wind whispered softly outside his window, Harry drifted into an uneasy sleep, his thoughts swirling like the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Chapter 5. Control and Consequence. By the time Harry turned 8, his world had already expanded beyond what most children his age could even dream of. Yet, despite the magic that filled his days, some limits felt increasingly burdensome. The absence of Dora had left a noticeable gap in the household. Her lively presence, her ever-shifting hair colors, and the chaos she brought with her magic had always kept things energetic. But now, with her at Hogwarts, she had started earlier that year, the house felt quieter, more serious. Without Dora to share in his frustrations and adventures, Harry found himself spending more time with Ted and Andromeda. Tonks, ever the patient teacher, nurtured Harry's curiosity, introducing him to the idea that magic was as much about control as it was about power. Andromeda, with her gentle wisdom, shared stories that carried lessons of responsibility and restraint. Harry's understanding of magic began to deepen in the days that followed. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but a gradual shift in the way he approached his lessons and how he handled himself. Ted's lessons, Andromeda's stories, and the haunting memories of seeing Street Mungo's patience all lingered in his mind, pushing him to consider the weight of every spell he attempted. One brisk autumn morning, Harry accompanied Ted to his law office in Diagon Alley. It was a rare opportunity for Harry to step outside the protective bounds of the Tonks household, and even rarer for him to witness the less glamorous side of the wizarding world. Ted's office, tucked in a potions shop and a dusty old apothecary, was small and unassuming, filled with piles of paperwork, magical contracts, and books on magical law. To Harry, it seemed both fascinating and overwhelming. As they entered the office, Ted offered Harry a seat beside his desk while he sorted through a stack of case files. "I know it doesn't look like much, but magical law is important work," Ted said with a smile, catching Harry's inquisitive glance at the towering piles of parchment. Harry swung his legs, glancing around the room. "Do you help people with magic here?" Ted chuckled softly, sitting down behind his cluttered desk. "In a way, yes. But it's more about helping people navigate the rules of the magical world. Laws can be just as complicated as any spell, sometimes more so. Harry's gaze wandered to a file labeled with the name of a wizard who had clearly gotten himself into trouble. What did he do? Ted glanced at the file and sighed. He's in a bad spot. Tried to use magic to solve all his problems. But magic can only do so much. Sometimes used in desperation makes things worse. This intrigued Harry. He had always thought of magic as something that could fix anything. But Ted's words planted a seed of doubt. Why didn't it work? Ted leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Because magic can't solve everything, Harry. Sure, it's powerful, but it can also be dangerous when people misuse it. That wizard thought magic would solve his financial problems, but he ended up breaking magical laws in the process, and now, well, he might lose everything. Harry frowned, turning Ted's words over in his mind. It was the first time he'd considered that magic, as powerful as it was, had its limits. The realization was sobering. In the days that followed, Harry found himself visiting Street Mungo's more frequently with Andromeda. She had always taken him along when she went to check on Sirius or to visit patients, but lately, her focus had shifted. With Dora away at Hogwarts and Sirius still in a coma, Andromeda had more time to show Harry what healing magic truly involved. On one of their visits, they walked through the hospital's long, brightly lit corridors, the sound of soft footsteps and the occasional murmured spell filling the air. The atmosphere was a far cry from the playful magical experiments Harry was used to at home. Here, magic wasn't about fun or discovery, it was about survival and, sometimes, heartbreak. Andromeda guided Harry into a ward where several patients lay in enchanted beds, their bodies twisted or scarred from magical accidents. One wizard was missing an arm, a large portion of which had been erased by a poorly cast vanishing spell. Another patient had vines creeping up his legs from a botched herbology experiment gone terribly wrong. Harry's stomach churned as he looked around. "Can't you heal them?" he asked Andromeda, his voice small. Andromeda knelt beside him, her eyes kind but serious. "We try, Harry, but magic isn't always as simple as waving a wand and saying a spell. Some injuries are too deep, too complex for even the best healers to completely undo." Harry bit his lip, feeling the weight of her words. He had always believed that magic could fix anything, that no matter what happened, there was always a spell or potion to make things right. But seeing these patients, people who had fallen through the cracks magical healing, made him realize that even magic had its limits. One patient in particular caught Harry's eye. A young girl, no older than Dora, lay motionless in her bed, her face pale and her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her hands twitched, or than that, she showed no signs of life. She was caught in a magical explosion, Andromeda explained softly, noticing Harry's gaze. A duel that went horribly wrong. Harry's heart tightened in his chest. "Can she be healed?" Andromeda shook her head, her expression sad. "Not entirely. We've done what we can, but sometimes the wounds go deep. Because the magic involved is too complex to counter." The thought haunted Harry. Magic, with all its intrigue and wonder, could destroy as much as help. It didn't always heal. Sometimes it did the opposite. Back at home, Harry sat in his room that evening, staring at the ceiling. The day's events had left him unsettled. He had always been so focused on learning new spells, mastering wandless magic, and pushing the boundaries of what he could do. But now, after seeing what could go wrong, he wasn't so sure anymore. What if he made a mistake? What if his magic hurt someone, like the girl in the hospital? The silver band around his wrist felt heavier than usual. He touched it absently, his fingers tracing the smooth metal. He knew why it was there. It was there to protect him, to protect others. But part of him still resented it, still longed to cast spells freely, to prove that he could control his magic on his own. But after today, the idea of losing control seemed far more dangerous than it ever had before. The next morning, Harry found himself back in the garden, practicing his magic in the crisp autumn air. Ted had suggested he try something small, something harmless, like levitating a leaf or summoning a pebble. But Harry's mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the wizard in Ted's office who had used magic recklessly, about the patients at St. Mungo's who couldn't be healed. And about the girl whose life had been shattered by magic. As Harry stretched out his hand, focusing on a small rock in front of him, the magic stirred inside him, familiar yet volatile. He whispered the incantation for a simple levitation charm, trying to push his emotions aside, but the thoughts kept creeping back into his mind. The rock lifted, but only for a moment before it shot upward, faster than he intended, and slammed into the side of the house with a loud crack. Harry winced, his heart racing. "Harry," Ted's voice called from the back door. He had been watching quietly, sensing the boy's frustration. "Magic isn't just about forcing things. It's about patience." Harry sighed, running a hand through his messy black hair. "I'm trying to be." Ted walked over, kneeling beside him. "I know you are, but sometimes, trying too hard can make it harder to control. You have to find the balance between your emotions and your magic. If you let one control the other, things can go wrong." Harry frowned, glancing down at his hands. "Like the people in St. Mungo's." Ted nodded slowly. "Yes, exactly like that." Over the next few weeks, Harry focused less on pushing the limits of his magic and more on understanding it, learning how to control his emotions, and how to remain calm even when his magic surged inside him like a storm waiting to break free. He spent more time with Ted at the office, watching how the complexities of magical law shaped the lives of wizards who, despite their power, still faced struggles that magic couldn't solve. He listened to Andromeda's stories of patients who, even with the most skilled healers, couldn't be fully saved. Slowly, Harry began to understand something deeper about the world he was growing up in. Magic, for all its wonder, couldn't fix everything. It couldn't heal every wound, solve every problem, or protect everyone from harm. It was a partner, an assistant, a powerful one, yes, but it was still just that, a helping hand. And like any life partner, it requires responsibility, understanding, and respect. One rainy afternoon, as the clouds rolled heavily across the sky, Harry found himself once again in the garden, practicing his magic. But this time, something was different. Instead of rushing into a spell, eager to see what he could accomplish, Harry paused. He stood still for a long moment, feeling the dampness of the earth beneath his feet and the soft drizzle of rain against his skin. Magic was there, as it always was, alive, pulsing beneath the surface of everything around him. He could feel it in the air, in the trees, in the very soil that his shoes pressed into. But instead of diving headfirst into the power that called to him, Harry closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Control. That's what Ted had taught him. It wasn't just about using magic, it was about knowing when not to. Opening his eyes, Harry focused on a single leaf that had fallen from one of the nearby trees. It was small, fragile, and coated with droplets of rain. Harry raised his hand, palm facing the leaf, and whispered the incantation for a simple levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa. This time, the magic came slowly, not in a rush, but as a steady flow. The leaf trembled, lifting just an inch off the ground. Harry concentrated, keeping his emotions in check, feeling the magic as a part of him but not letting it take over. The leaf floated higher, hovering in the air for several moments before gently falling back down. It was simple, but it was controlled. Harry smiled, the satisfaction not in the grandeur of the spell but in the precision. He had done it. No bursts of uncontrolled power, no accidents, no rocks exploding across the garden. Just a single leaf, lifted and lowered with intention. Later that evening, Harry sat with Andromeda in the sitting room, his mind still replaying the practice in the garden. He had been so focused on controlling his magic that he hadn't noticed Andromeda watching him from the window. "I saw you practicing today," she said, her tone soft but approving. Harry looked up, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, I'm trying to get better at controlling it." Andromeda smiled warmly, setting down the book she had been reading. "You're doing well, Harry. Learning to control your magic, especially at your age, is no small feat. But it's not just about learning spells, is it?" Harry shook his head. "No, it's about finding balance." "Exactly," Andromeda said, nodding proudly. "Magic responds to emotion. It feeds off it, amplifies it. That's why it's so important to understand yourself. To stay calm, even when it feels like the magic inside you is ready to burst." Harry thought about that. He had always felt his emotions were linked to his magic, but he hadn't fully grasped just how deep that connection ran. The times when his magic had surged out of control, when the rocks had exploded or the spells had backfired, had always been when he was feeling something intense: frustration, anger, or fear. "I get scared sometimes," Harry admitted quietly, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the pattern of the couch. "Of what might happen if I lose control." Andromeda's expression softened. "That fear is natural, even adult wizards feel it. But it's how you handle that fear that matters. You're already learning to recognize the signs, to feel when your magic is getting too strong. That awareness will help you, Harry. It's what makes a great wizard." Harry didn't say anything for a moment, but he felt a warmth spread through him at her words. It wasn't just about power. It was about control, responsibility, and, most importantly, understanding himself. As the weeks passed, Harry began spending more time with Ted at his law office. The bustling activity of Diagon Alley was always a welcome change from the quiet of home, but it was in Ted's office that Harry found himself learning some of his most valuable lessons. On one particular visit, Ted was meeting with a client who had gotten into trouble for misusing magic. The man, a haggard-looking wizard with dark circles under his eyes, sat slumped in his chair, explaining his situation in a low, defeated voice. "I didn't mean for it to happen," the man muttered, his fingers twisting anxiously in his lap. I lost control for a second. I know how to fix it." Harry, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, listened intently. There it was again: control. The man hadn't wanted to cause harm, but his emotions had gotten the better of him, and now he was facing the consequences. Ted, ever calm and professional, nodded thoughtfully as the man spoke. "Losing control of magic happens to the best of us," Ted said gently, his voice soothing. "But the important thing now is how you handle the situation going forward. There's always a way to make things right." As Ted continued to speak with his client, Harry reflected on what he had seen at St. Mungo's and what he was learning now. Magic wasn't a perfect solution, and even the most skilled wizards could make mistakes. But the key was learning from those mistakes, understanding where things had gone wrong, and doing better next time. When the meeting ended and the client left, Ted turned to Harry, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've seen a lot lately, haven't you?" he asked. Harry nodded, his thoughts still swirling. "Yeah, magic. It's not what I thought it was." Ted smiled softly. "It rarely is. Magic, like life, is complicated. It's powerful, but it's also fragile. And just like with anything else, it takes practice, patience, and understanding." Harry glanced down at his hands, thinking about the leaf he had levitated in the garden, the patience at St. Mungo's, and the man who had come to Ted for help. There were so many layers to the world of magic, so many things he hadn't considered before. "I want to get it right," Harry said quietly, more to himself than to Ted. "You will," Ted replied confidently. "And getting it right doesn't mean being perfect. It means being mindful of your power, of your emotions, of the consequences of your actions." Harry nodded, absorbing Ted's words. There was a lot to learn, and he knew it wouldn't happen overnight. But with each day, each practice session, and each lesson he observed, Harry was getting closer to mastering the balance he sought. That night, as Harry lay in bed, the familiar W8 of the silver band on his wrist felt less like a restriction and more like a reminder. It was a symbol of what he was working toward: control, understanding, and the kind of power that came not from raw magic, but from knowing when and how to use it. The storm outside had calmed, and as the last raindrops tapped softly against the window, Harry closed his eyes, the warmth of Andromeda's words and Ted's lesson settling into his mind. For the first time, he didn't feel the usual frustration with the band or with his magic. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of peace. He was learning, and that was enough for now. Tomorrow, there will be more lessons, more moments to test his control. And with each one, Harry knew he would grow stronger, not just in magic, but in himself. Chapter 6. The French Approach. By the time Harry turned 10, his world had already expanded in ways that set him apart from most other children his age. While others his age might have been preparing for Hogwarts without much forethought, Harry had spent the past 2 years under a more intense lens. His magic, powerful and unpredictable, had required constant guidance and control. But now, as he approached the age when most wizards began their magical education in earnest, the silver band that had dampened his magic for so long was finally coming off. The decision had not been made lightly. Andromeda, Ted, and even Dumbledore weighed the risks and benefits, finally deciding that Harry needed to learn to control his magic without the band's help. After all, he couldn't wear it forever. He had to face his power head-on. It was a crisp, sunny afternoon when Andromeda and Ted gathered in the living room. Dumbledore sat serenely in one of the armchairs, his blue eyes twinkling kindly behind half-moon spectacles. "Are you ready, Harry?" Dumbledore asked, his voice gentle yet filled with the gravity of the situation. Harry swallowed hard, glancing down at the silver band around his wrist. It had been a part of him for so long that the thought of taking it off felt exciting and terrifying. He nodded. With a careful, deliberate motion, Andromeda approached Harry, her wand raised. "This won't hurt," she reassured him. "But once the band is off, you'll need to focus. Don't let the magic overwhelm you." Harry nodded again, feeling the familiar stir of his magic beneath his skin, waiting to be set free. Andromeda muttered an incantation under her breath, and with a soft click, the silver band unlocked and fell into her hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Harry looked at his bare wrist, feeling the cool air where the band had once been. But then, slowly, he felt the magic. It was as if a dam had been released. His magic, carefully contained for years, surged forward, eager to break free. The room seemed to shimmer with energy, and the air around him started vibrating, rippling with the raw power of his magic. "Breathe, Harry," Dumbledore instructed, his voice steady and calm from across the room. "Let it flow. But remember, you control the magic, not the other way around." Harry closed his eyes and drew in a deep breath. He could feel the surge of magic coursing through him, raw and untamed. Like a wild river swelling after a storm. Its energy roared within him, eager to break free. But instead of resisting it, Harry focused inward, guiding the torrent with calm intention. Gradually, the tension in the air began to dissipate, and the magic, once wild and chaotic, responded to his will, settling into a steady, controlled rhythm. When he opened his eyes again, the room was still. Nothing had been broken. No accidental spells had gone off. The magic was there, but it was quiet, waiting for him to decide when and how to use it. Dumbledore smiled. "Well done, Harry. The first step in mastering your magic is learning not to fear it." Over the next several weeks, Harry began having lessons with Dumbledore once a week, focused entirely on controlling his magic. The headmaster was a patient and insightful teacher, guiding Harry through various techniques to calm his mind and stop magical outbursts before they could escalate. One afternoon, during one of their lessons, Harry found himself struggling with a particularly difficult exercise. Dumbledore had asked him to summon a simple object, a quill, in this case, without a wand. At first, it seemed easy enough, but Harry's magic, still raw and powerful, flared unexpectedly, sending the quill flying across the room with a burst of uncontrolled energy. Harry groaned in frustration, clenching his fists as he stared at the quill now embedded in the far wall. Dumbledore, however, remained calm, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Control isn't about suppressing your power, Harry. It's about understanding it. Magic is a living G-force that responds to your emotions and thoughts. When you're frustrated, it reacts accordingly." Harry sighed, feeling the weight of his impatience. "It's just hard. I want to do it right, but sometimes it feels like the magic has a mind of its own." Dumbledore nodded. "In a way, it does. Magic is deeply connected to who we are. It reflects us and amplifies us. The key is not to fight it but to listen, to work with it. Let's try again. But this time, don't focus on controlling the magic. Focus on understanding it." Harry took a deep breath, centering himself. He stretched out his hand, his thoughts calmer now. Slowly, the quill lifted from the table, floating gently toward him. No burst of energy, no wild explosion. A steady, controlled flow of magic. Dumbledore smiled approvingly. Much better. As Harry's lessons progressed, so too did his understanding of the magical world. Ted and Andromeda, always keen to expand Harry's horizons, had planned a trip to France that summer, AC. Hence for Harry to explore magical cultures beyond the borders of Britain. From the moment they arrived in Paris, Harry was captivated. The magical community in France was both familiar and strange, filled with customs and traditions what he had grown up knowing. Magical shops lined the narrow cobblestone streets, filled with artifacts, books, and potions that Harry had never seen before. On one particular afternoon, Ted took Harry to a magical bookstore near the Place des Sorciers, the French equivalent of Diagon Alley. The store, a small, dusty place tucked between a wand shop and a bakery, was filled with ancient tomes on magical theory, potions, and the history of wizard kind. Harry's eyes widened as he scanned the shelves, his fingers brushing the spines of old, leather-bound books. "These are amazing," he murmured, pulling out a book titled Les Secrets des Enchantements Anciens. Ted smiled, watching Harry's excitement. The French magical community has a long and rich history. You'll find that their approach to magic is different from what we're used to in Britain. As Harry flipped through the pages of the book, he noticed something odd. Some of the terms for non-magical people were different from those he was used to. Instead of muggle, the French wizards used the term non-mage, which seemed far less derogatory. "What does non-mage mean?" Harry asked, frowning slightly. Ted raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that's the term they use in America for non-magical people. It's a more neutral term than muggle." Harry's brow furrowed. "Why do we call them muggles in Britain? It sounds, I don't know, a bit dismissive." Ted's expression grew thoughtful. "It's an old term, Harry. Some say it was used to distinguish magical folk from non-magical ones, but it does carry a certain superiority. The French, and even the Americans, prefer non-magique, or no major. It's seen as more respectful." Harry chewed on that thought for a moment. The more he explored the magical world, the more he began to question why things were the way they were. Why were people like Ted called Muggle-borns, instead of just wizards? Why was magic divided into categories like light and dark, when all magic was, at its core, just magic? These questions began to weigh heavily on Harry's mind as they wandered the streets of Paris. The more he saw, the more he realized how limited his understanding of magic had been. In France, wizards didn't seem as bound by the same strict rules that governed British magic. The shops sold potions and artifacts that would have been deemed dark in Britain, but here, they were simply tools, neither good nor evil on their own. Later that day, as they visited a small potion shop near the Seine, Harry found himself captivated by the variety of ingredients available. Some were familiar, like dragon's blood and phoenix feathers, but others were completely foreign. Some potions promised to enhance magical abilities, heal wounds that couldn't be mended by a wand, and even calm wild magic surges. As they left the shop, Harry turned to Ted, his mind buzzing with questions. Why do people in Britain separate magic into light and dark? It doesn't seem that way here. Ted smiled, his eyes twinkling with pride at Harry's curiosity. "That's a very good question, Harry. In Britain, there's a long history of fear surrounding certain types of magic. People believe that some magic is inherently evil, but that's not always the case. Here, in France, they see magic as a tool. It's the intent behind it that matters, not the magic itself." Harry nodded slowly, absorbing Ted's words. As they continued their journey through France, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to magic than what he had been taught. The world was vast, filled with different cultures, different ideas, and different ways of understanding magic. And for the first time, Harry realized that the magical world wasn't as black and white as he had once believed. It was complex, just like the magic inside him. The trip to France had been more than just a break from the familiarity of Britain. It had opened Harry's eyes to the diversity of magic and tea. He whirled beyond the small bubble he had grown up in. His questions grew sharper, his curiosity more intense. Magic wasn't just something to be mastered, it was something to be understood, questioned, and sometimes even challenged. One afternoon, as Harry and Ted wandered through a narrow street lined with magical shops, Harry's gaze landed on a small bookshop tucked between two towering buildings. The sign above the door read Les Livres du Monde, and through the dusty window, Harry could see rows of bookshelves packed tightly together, ancient tomes leaning precariously against one another. "I want to go in there," Harry said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Ted nodded, following Harry inside. The shop was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of old parchment and leather. As they stepped inside, a bell above the door tinkled, and a tall, thin man appeared from behind the counter, his sharp eyes glinting with curiosity. "Bienvenue," the man said in a low voice. "How may I assist you today?" Harry hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. He had come here on impulse, drawn by some invisible force. But now, standing amid so much magical knowledge, he felt a little lost. Ted, sensing Harry's uncertainty, stepped forward with a warm smile. "We're just browsing. My nephew here has developed quite an interest in magical theory." The man nodded, his gaze lingering on Harry for a moment before he disappeared into the back of the shop, leaving them to explore. Harry wandered through the narrow aisles, his fingers trailing over the spines of books on everything from ancient magical history to alchemical practices. But it was one section, in particular, that caught his eye: Les Mages Étrangers, a collection of books on foreign magical practices. One book stood out among the others, its cover a deep shade of blue with silver lettering. Harry pulled it from the shelf, intrigued by the title, Les Fondements de la Magie sans Baguette, The Foundations of Wandless Magic. His heart skipped a beat. He had been practicing wandless magic with Dumbledore's guidance, but this book seemed to offer something more, a deeper understanding of the power that came from magi. See performed without the constraints of a wand. Ted noticed Harry's interest and smiled. "That's a good one," he said, his voice low. "The French have a rich tradition of wandless magic, especially in the countryside. It's a more fluid form of magic, more about instinct than incantations." Harry nodded, already flipping through the pages. The text was dense, filled with diagrams and detailed descriptions of how to channel magic through the body, and how to focus it without the aid of a wand. It was far more advanced than anything he had learned so far, but he felt a strange connection to it, as though this was the kind of magic he had been waiting for. Ted noticed Harry's interest and smiled. "That's a good one," he said, his voice low. "The French have a rich tradition of wandless magic, especially in the countryside. It's a more fluid form of magic, more about intuition than the incantations of wanded magic." Harry nodded, already flipping through the pages. The text was dense, filled with diagrams and detailed descriptions of how to channel magic through the body. It was far more advanced than anything he had learned so far, but he felt a strange connection to it, as though this was the kind of magic he had been waiting for. Just as Harry became fully engrossed, Ted placed a hand on his shoulder, his tone shifting slightly. "Harry, I need to run a quick errand. It won't take long, just a few minutes." Harry looked up, a bit startled out of his focus. "Okay." Ted's expression grew more serious. "I know you're curious, but I need you to stay here until I get back, all right? Don't leave the shop, not even for a moment." Harry blinked, sensing the importance in Ted's voice. "Yeah, I'll stay here." Ted smiled, relieved. "Good lad, I'll be back soon." As Ted left, Harry lost himself once again in the pages of the book. Time slipped away, the quiet atmosphere of the shop allowing him to dive deeper into the book's complex theories. It felt as though this had been waiting for something that resonated with him on a deeper level. Suddenly, the sound of a polite cough broke his concentration. He looked up to see the tall, thin shopkeeper standing nearby, his expression kind but firm. "Pardon, monsieur," the shopkeeper said softly, a slight French accent coloring his words. "But we do not encourage too much reading without buying. If you would like to continue, perhaps you might consider purchasing the book." Harry blinked, embarrassed as he realized how long he had been standing there. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said quickly, snapping the book shut. "I'll buy it." The shopkeeper's stern look softened into a smile. "No harm done, young monsieur. It is an excellent choice." Harry handed over the money, feeling a rush of excitement as the shopkeeper carefully wrapped the book in parchment. He clutched it tightly and turned to leave the shop, his mind still buzzing with the new magical knowledge he had glimpsed. As he stepped out into the bustling street, a thrill of excitement surged through him. He had his book, a window into a world of magic he never imagined. Without thinking, he began walking, the magical marketplace of Paris, Le Marché Magique, beckoning him deeper into its vibrant heart. Harry forgot Ted's warning. The further he wandered, the more he marveled at the strange and wonderful things the market offered. Street performers conjured animals out of thin air, while potion stalls emitted colorful wisps of smoke. The noise and energy around him was intoxicating. After what felt like only a few minutes, a cold realization hit him. He had no idea where he was. Panic started to bubble up in his chest. He spun around, scanning the crowds, but there was no sign of Ted or Andromeda. His heart hammered in his chest. What was he thinking? Ted had explicitly told him not to leave the shop, and now he was completely lost. He glanced around frantically, feeling smaller with each passing moment. Looking for someone. Chapter 7. The Stirring of Change. The soft voice startled Harry, and he turned to see a striking girl a few years older than him, her silvery blonde hair shimmering under the sun, her blue eyes warm and curious. Yes, Harry stammered, his cheeks flushing in embarrassment. I got separated from my family. She smiled gently. No worries. This place can be a maze if you're not familiar with it. Where did you last see them? Harry racked his brain, trying to remember. I think they were near the cafes, by the square. Come on, then, she said, her voice reassuring as she began to lead the way. You shouldn't be wandering alone. Especially today. It's far too crowded. Harry followed her, still feeling the weight of embarrassment. He knew he shouldn't have left the shop, but the excitement of the market had swept him up. As they walked, he couldn't help but steal glances at the girl. She moved with a natural grace, her confidence making her seem older than she was. You're English, right? She asked, glancing at him with a smile. Yeah, Harry replied, still feeling a bit flustered. I'm here on holiday with my family. As they turned a corner, Harry spotted Andromeda and Ted up ahead. Ted looked frantic, his face pale as he searched the crowd. The moment Ted's eyes landed on Harry, a mixture of relief and frustration washed over his face. The girl smiled again as they approached the Tonks family. There you go, safe and sound. Thank you, Harry said earnestly, his cheeks flushing slightly as he met her gaze. Before he could ask for her name, she gave him a small, mysterious smile and began to walk away. Wait, Harry called after her. What's your name? She paused, glancing over her shoulder, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Maybe we'll meet again, little boy, she aid with a wink before disappearing into the crowd. Harry stood there, watching her go, feeling both awed and bewildered. There was something about the girl that he couldn't quite explain, something that left a lasting impression on him. Thanks, Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. He was grateful, but the reality of what he had done was starting to hit him. Ted rushed toward Harry, his face a storm of emotions. Harry, he exclaimed, his voice tight with panic. Where have you been? I told you to stay in the shop. I'm sorry, Harry stammered, his guilt weighing heavily on him. I didn't mean to leave. You got carried away, Ted finished, his voice stern but his expression softening as he put a hand on Harry's shoulder. You gave us a scare. I'm sorry, Ted, Harry said, his eyes downcast. Andromeda appeared by Ted's side, her arms crossed, but her expression was more of concern than anger. We've been looking everywhere for you, Harry. You should know better than to wander off. Harry nodded, feeling the full weight of their worry. I won't do it again, I promise. Ted sighed, his hand ruffling Harry's hair as the tension eased. Just stay close next time, all right. Harry nodded again, clutching the book tighter. He was grateful for their concern, but the excitement he had felt earlier had been replaced by a deep sense of regret. As they walked back through the marketplace, Harry glanced back once, hoping to catch another glimpse of the girl who had helped him. But she was gone, swallowed by the crowd as if she had never been there at all. On the last few days of their trip, Harry started to reflect on his experiences. The French magical community, so different from what he knew in Britain, captivated him. Unlike the secretive nature of British wizards, the French had a subtler integration with the non-magical world. Harry marveled at the openness, from the magical shops hidden in plain sight to the majestic obelisk that housed the French Ministry of Magic in the heart of Paris. During their holiday, Harry made it a point to explore as much of the French magical world as possible. The ministry, unlike Britain's concealed hub, was open to visitors, and Harry was fascinated by the free-flowing interaction between the French magical community and the no-mage world. It seemed less divided, and more harmonious, something he hadn't experienced back home. In the evening before going home, they dined at a magical cafe. Ted explained the differences in magical laws between France and Britain. The French are much more open about magic, he said, his tone thoughtful. They don't isolate themselves as much from no mace. There's a level of trust between the no-mage government and the French Ministry of Magic that is what lets them coexist more openly than we do. Harry listened, absorbing every word. He had always wondered why the magical world in Britain seemed so isolated from Muggles. Now, he saw that it didn't have to be that way. Different countries had different approaches to magic, and the idea that magical practices could vary so much intrigued him. The world of magic wasn't a monolith, it was vast and diverse, waiting to be explored. As the holiday drew to a close, Harry felt a strange excitement bubbling inside him. His experiences in France, the French ministry, the vibrant, magical streets, and especially the mysterious girl he had met, had opened his eyes to just how vast the magical world truly was. Hogwarts, he realized, was only the beginning. On the final evening in Paris, Harry sat by the window of their hotel, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the city. His thoughts wandered back to the marketplace, the French ministry, and the girl who had left such a deep impression on him. Her confidence, her grace, the way she spoke about Beauxbatons, everything about her lingered in his mind. She embodied something more, a world of magic beyond Hogwarts and the British magical system. A deep yearning stirred within him. There was so much more to discover, and for the first time, Harry felt an overwhelming desire to explore it all. The world of magic was far bigger than he had ever imagined. With a quiet sigh, he turned away from the window, his heart heavy yet excited. Tomorrow, now, Harry knew one thing for certain, his journey into the magical world was just beginning. Later that week, during one of his lessons with Dumbledore, Harry brought up what he had learned from the book Les Fondements de la Magie sans Baguette, The Foundations of Wandless Magic. I've been reading about wandless magic, Harry said, as they sat together in a quiet room of the Tonks house. It's different from what we've been doing. Dumbledore nodded, his eyes twinkling with interest. Ah, French magic. A very ancient and powerful culture of magic, indeed. It requires an extraordinary level of focus and self-awareness. In many ways, it is more natural, more instinctive. But it is also more difficult to control. Harry hesitated, unsure of how to phrase the question that had been gnawing at him since he started reading the book. Why don't more wizards practice it? Why does everyone rely on wands so much? Dumbledore smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with age. Wands, Harry, are tools of focus. They help channel our magic, making it easier to control and direct. Over time, wizards have come to depend on them. Perhaps more than we should. But magic existed long before wands, and in many parts of the world, wizards still practice wandle. Magic is a way of connecting more deeply with their power. Harry nodded, but the questions in his mind didn't stop there. Why do we call people like Ted, Muggle-borns? It doesn't seem right. Dumbledore's expression grew more serious, though there was still a gentleness in his gaze. That is a more complicated question. The term, Muggle-born, is, in many ways, a reflection of our society's tendency to create distinctions where there needn't be any. It is a label, and like many labels, it can carry connotations, both positive and negative. Some wizards, particularly those who cling to old beliefs, use it as a way to separate magical folk from non-magical families. But that doesn't make sense, Harry said, his voice rising slightly. Ted's just as much a wizard as anyone else. Why does it matter where he comes from? Dumbledore leaned forward, his eyes searching Harry's face. You are right to ask these questions, Harry. And you are right to feel that such distinctions are unnecessary. The magical world, much like the non-magical one, has its prejudices and its blind spots. Some people believe that magical bloodlines are superior and that only those from certain families are worthy of respect. But magic does not discriminate. It lives in all of us, regardless of where we come from. Harry felt a surge of frustration and confusion. He had always admired Ted and had looked up to him for his wisdom and kindness. The idea that anyone could look down on him simply because of his background made no sense at all. Dumbledore watched Harry's reaction closely. These are important questions you are asking, Harry. And they are questions that have been asked by many before you. The world we live in is not perfect. But it is through people like you, those who ask, why, that change begins. Later that same week, during one of his lessons with Dumbledore, Harry's curiosity was growing by the day. The discovery of Les Fondements de la Magie sans Baguette, the Foundation's O.F. wandless magic, had opened his eyes to new possibilities. I've been reading about wandless magic, from a book I got in France, Harry said, as they sat together in the quiet of the Tonks house. It feels different, more direct than what I do with my magic. It feels like I can't direct my magic, it just works then it wants to. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with understanding. That is perfectly understandable, Harry. Wandless magic is an ancient art, deeply tied to a wizard's connection with their magical core, rather than relying on the focus of a wand. It requires a level of self-awareness and mastery that many find difficult to achieve. Much of the world, however, practice magic without wands. The French, for instance, have long studied wandless spells, and it is quite common in places like Africa and South America, where magic is seen as something more intrinsic, a natural part of life. He paused, looking thoughtfully at Harry. For you to have any ability to control your magic at such a young age, Harry, speaks volumes of your talent and your connection to your core. Harry shifted slightly in his seat, unsure whether to feel proud or overwhelmed. But if it's so important, why don't more British wizards practice it? Why are we so dependent on wands? Dumbledore smiled warmly, stroking his beard. Ah, an excellent question. Wands, my dear boy, serve as a tool to help channel and direct our magic. Much like how a lens focuses a beam of light. With a wand, magic becomes easier to shape and easier to command. Wands were invented to simplify the process of spellcasting. Without one, the magic is still present within you, potent and ready, but it's far more difficult to control and refine. Wandless magic demands a deeper connection to one's magical core. He leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more reflective. You see, Harry, many wizards grow accustomed to that ease, to the efficiency of using a wand. Over time, they forget that magic is something that flows from within, not just from the tip of a piece of wood. And because of that, wandless magic is rarely pursued in Britain. It is often seen as too difficult, too unpredictable. Harry frowned, considering this. So, it's easier, but not necessarily better. Precisely, Dumbledore said, his eyes twinkling once again. Wands allow us to focus our power, but in doing so, they also limit us in a way. Those who practice wandless magic, like the French or African wizards, see it as a more natural extension of themselves. But, as with all things, it comes with its challenges. Mastering magic without a wand requires more discipline, more patience, and, in many cases, a deeper understanding of oneself. So it's about knowing yourself as much as the magic? Harry asked, intrigued. Dumbledore nodded. Exactly. A wand is like a crutch, Harry. It helps us walk, but if we never learn to walk on our own, we might never discover the full extent of our abilities. Harry furrowed his brow. You called something a mana core. Dumbledore's eyes brightened at Harry's question. Yes, Harry. The mana core is an essential concept, one that you'll delve into more deeply when you study magical theory at Hogwarts. But I can give you a simple explanation now, he said, his voice soft and patient. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands thoughtfully. Every magical being has a core within them, an invisible well of power. It's not something you can see or touch, but it's there, nonetheless. Wizards, magical creatures, and even some animals possess them, though not all creatures can access their core consciously as we do. This core, or mana core, grows and changes as we grow, becoming stronger as we practice and learn. It's what powers everything we do, our spells, rituals, enchantments, even the most basic magical instincts. Harry thought about that for a moment. So, is that why some people can use magic, and others can't? What about people like Ted, who are born to non-magical parents? Dumbledore's expression softened. You are asking very wise questions, Harry. Yes, all living beings have some form of a core, but not all can tap into it in the way wizards can. For people like Ted, the core is awakened naturally. His parents, though not magical themselves, may still carry a dormant core that wasn't able to activate. And then, some cannot access their core at all, either due to the absence of certain magical traits or because their core never truly awakens. So, it's not about blood, then? Harry asked, frowning. Why does everyone make such a big deal about it? Precisely, Dumbledore said, nodding gravely. It is not about the purity of one's lineage, but rather the connection to magic itself. The term, Muggle-born, which is a rather unfortunate and limiting label, does not fully capture the reality of how magic flows through all in every being, Harry, whether they can access it or not. Harry pondered this, feeling a sense of injustice rise within him. Quote, then why do we treat people differently if magic is inside everyone? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled again, but there was a sadness behind them. Fear, Harry. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing power. It is a tale as old as time, in both the magical and non-magical worlds. But you, and those like you who ask such important questions, are the ones who can change things. As the summer stretched on, Harry's lessons with Dumbledore evolved beyond mere spellcasting, opening up into deeper conversations about magic itself. Dumbledore would often reflect on his time as a young Hogwarts graduate, traveling to France to study under one of the most brilliant and long-lived alchemists in history, Nicholas Flamel. One evening, not long after my graduation, Dumbledore began one night as they sat in the quiet of the garden. I had the extraordinary privilege of beginning my apprenticeship with Nicholas Flamel. He was a master of many forms of magic, not just alchemy. He took me to France, where I learned to see magic in a new light. Harry leaned in, his curiosity piqued. What was it like, learning from someone like him? Dumbledore smiled wistfully, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. It was both humbling and exhilarating. Nicholas showed me that magic was far more than just casting spells. It was an art, a philosophy, a way of shaping reality. In France, magic was viewed less as a rigid science and more as an expression of the soul. There were no strict divisions between light and dark, as we have in Britain. Magic's potential goes far beyond the bounds of good or evil, it's all about intention and understanding. Harry's interest deepened as he listened. So, it wasn't about avoiding dark magic. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Indeed, Nicholas taught me that magic was not something to be feared, but something to be explored with wonder. It wasn't about categories of light or dark, but rather how we choose to use it. He believed magic was a tool to shape the world, not just to bend it to our will, but to understand it. He showed me how to look beyond the spells, beyond the wands, and into the very essence of magic itself. Those lessons, Harry, have stayed with me all my life. Harry's thoughts wandered to what he had seen in the bookshops in France, filled with strange runes and magical texts from places far beyond Britain. Then why in Britain do we divide magic into light and dark? Dumbledore paused, gazing at the sky. That sadly is a construct of fear, Harry. In Britain, there has been a history of malicious wizards coming to power then wielding that power to force their ideology on the populace. In truth, Harry, magic is neither good nor evil. It is only the intent behind the spell that matters. In other cultures, magic is viewed more holistically. For instance, in places like Africa and South America, magic is often seen as a connection to the earth, the stars, and the spirits of the world. They use runes, places of power, and rituals to access the same magic that we do with wands. The divisions we create here are simply our way of trying to make sense of something vast and complex. Harry pondered this, imagining how differently magic was viewed in other parts of the world. It sounds like Nicholas helped you see magic in a whole new way to not be constrained by what is popular opinion. Dumbledore nodded with a shine of pride in his eyes. Yes, our time together expanded my horizons. Magic was no longer just a means to an end, but a way to shape reality itself. He taught me that the core of a wizard, our mana if you will, is like a great puzzle. It is sometimes calming, sometimes frustrating, but always ready to be understood. Our task as wizards is not to simply wield it, but to understand how it moves, how it connects with the world around us. Harry sat back, letting the thought settle in. The idea that magic was more than just spells or wand movements, that it was something deeper, was starting to resonate with him. And, as he looked up at the stars, he felt that there was much more to learn, more than he had ever imagined. Harry felt the familiar buzz of curiosity stirring inside him. There was so much more to learn, about magic, about himself, and about the world beyond what he had known. As he looked up at the stars, he felt that pull, that unquenchable desire to understand more. His mana core, as Dumbledore described it, was just beginning to stir, and he knew that his journey had only just begun. Chapter 8. Hogwarts Letter. The morning of Harry's 13th birthday dawned bright and warm, sunlight streaming through the windows of the Tonks kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed tea mingled with the scent of eggs and toast, adding a comforting backdrop to the day. Harry sat at the kitchen table, absently, tracing patterns on its polished wood surface, his thoughts restless and wandering. 13 felt like a pivotal age, a turning point. Yet, the day had started as unremarkably as any other. His fingers twitched slightly, his gaze flicking to the window every few moments. Across from him, Dora, ever perceptive, was watching with a knowing grin. Her hair was a playful lavender today, shimmering faintly in the morning light. "You're going to wear a hole in the table if you keep that up," she teased. "Relax. The owl's probably stopping for a bite at the leaky cauldron. Or maybe it's holding out for a dramatic entrance." Harry gave a faint smile but couldn't hide the tension thrumming under his skin. His gaze darted back to the window. "It will come," Andromeda said firmly, placing a plate of toast and eggs in front of him. Her voice was warm and reassuring. "Hogwarts doesn't forget anyone, and you're certainly not going to be the exception." Before Harry could respond, a faint tap at the window made his heart leap. A proud tawny owl perched on the sill, a thick cream-colored envelope tied neatly to its leg. Harry jumped up, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste. He opened the W.I.N.D.O. with slightly trembling hands and untied the envelope. The weight of it, the smooth parchment and the elegant green script, felt impossibly real. He read the address aloud, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and excitement. Harry James Potter Tonks residence. 2nd bedroom, 1st floor. "Well, don't just stand there, open it," Dora urged, bouncing slightly in her seat. Harry broke the wax seal, his fingers steadying as he unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find the enclosed list of all the necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." Harry read it twice, the words sinking in slowly. His next chapter had begun. He was going to Hogwarts. Ted, seated nearby with his usual cup of tea and the Daily Prophet, lowered the paper with a proud smile. "Congratulations, Harry, it's official now. Welcome to Hogwarts." Andromeda's expression softened, a mix of pride and wistfulness. "This is just the beginning, Harry. Hogwarts will be an adventure, one you'll carry with you for the rest of your life." Dora, meanwhile, was practically glowing with excitement. "And don't you worry, I'll be there to keep an eye on you. 5th years know all the best tricks and secrets." Harry's grin widened, some of the tension easing from his chest. "When can we go to Diagon Alley?" "How about tomorrow?" Andromeda suggested. "You'll need plenty of time to get your books, robes, and, most importantly, your wand." Dora leaned closer with a conspiratorial smirk. "And maybe we can sneak a stop at Quality Quidditch Supplies. Trust me, Harry, you'll want to see the brooms." The next morning, Harry found himself once again swept into the wonder of Diagon Alley. The cobblestone streets hummed with wizards bustling between shops, calling out greetings, or haggling over cauldron prices. Even though Harry had visited before, today carried a new significance. This trip wasn't just another errand, It was for him, for his journey to Hogwarts. Their first stop was. The imposing marble facade of Gringotts Wizarding Bank towered over Harry as he stepped out of the bustling crowd in Diagon Alley and onto its wide, polished steps. Even after multiple visits, the sigh of the goblins and the grandiosity of the bank sent a thrill of awe through him. Right then, Tonks said cheerfully, placing a guiding hand on Harry's shoulder. Time to sort out your account. This is a big milestone for any young wizard. I thought Hogwarts students just used vaults their parents set up, Harry said, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness in his voice. Do I need to do something special? Not for most students, Andromeda explained, her tone calm and measured as they ascended the stairs. But you're not most students, Harry. You're a Potter. The vaults tied to your family come with responsibilities and opportunities. They entered the grand hall, the vaulted ceilings gleaming in the light of enchanted chandeliers. The air smelled faintly metallic, and the faint clinking of coins echoed in the distance. Goblins scurried to and fro, their sharp eyes and long fingers darting over ledgers and stacks of galleons. The trio approached a high desk, behind which a particularly sharp-featured goblin stood. His piercing gaze meeting Harry's without hesitation. "Ah, Mr. Potter," the goblin said, his voice smooth and professional. "We've been expecting you. Ragnarok, at your service." Harry blinked. "You've been expecting me." Ragnarok's thin lips twitched into something resembling a smile. It is customary for heirs of prominent wizarding families to formalize their accounts upon reaching certain milestones. 13 is a significant age for magical inheritance. Ted gave Harry a reassuring nod. "Don't worry, lad, it's nothing complicated. Just paperwork and a few introductions to what's yours." Ragnarok motioned for them to follow. "If you will come with me, Mr. Potter, we shall review the details of your estate." They were led to a private room deep within Gringotts, its stone walls etched with intricate runes that glimmered faintly under flickering torchlight. A polished oak table sat in the center, piled with parchment and an ornate chest emblazoned with the Potter crest. "Your family estate is extensive," Ragnarok began, his tone brisk as he spread out the documents. "It includes vaults in multiple locations, properties both magical and muggle, and various artifacts. Some of these items are currently under protective enchantments, given your age." Harry's head swam at the mention of properties and artifacts. He glanced at Ted and Andromeda, who both nodded encouragingly. Ragnarok continued. "Vault 687 is your trust vault for daily access. It contains your school fund and discretionary finances. Vault 722 holds heirlooms and family records. Lastly, Vault 143, the Legacy Vault, is restricted until you reach majority." The mention of a Legacy Vault sent a shiver of intrigue through Harry. "What's in the Legacy Vault?" "Artifacts, rare books, and items passed down through the Potter lineage," Ragnarok replied. "Its contents are enchanted to remain confidential until the rightful heir is of age." Harry nodded, though the idea of hidden family treasures made his mind buzz with questions. The descent into the Gringotts tunnels was exhilarating. The goblin-pulled cart zoomed through narrow, twisting tracks, the air growing colder with each turn. Harry clutched the edge of the cart, a mixture of excitement and unease churning in his stomach. When they stopped outside Vault 687, Ragnarok retrieved a long, ornate key from his robe. The door was a solid slab of metal, carved with runes that shimmered as the goblin approached. "Your key, Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said, handing it to Harry. "A momentous occasion, opening your first vault." Harry slid the key into the lock. The runes flared briefly before the door swung open with a low groan, revealing neat stacks of galleons, sickles, and nuts that gleamed in the torchlight. Harry's breath caught. "There's so much," he murmured, stepping inside and running his fingers lightly over the cool metal of the coins. "Your parents ensured you'd have everything you needed for Hogwarts and beyond," Andromeda said softly, her voice tinged with pride and sadness. "Use it wisely, Harry." As Harry collected a pouchful of coins, Ted cleared his throat. "Harry, there's something important to understand about all this. Money's useful, sure, but what really matters is how you use what you've been given, not just the gold, but the opportunities it provides." Ragnarok chimed in. "Your family's influence extends far beyond wealth. The Potters were known for their efforts in magical research, diplomacy, and equality between magical beings." Harry's curiosity piqued. Equality. Like fighting against the dark wizards. In a way, Andromeda said, smiling faintly. Your ancestors believed magic should unite people, not divide them. They supported alliances with goblins, advocated for better treatment of no mace, and even funded schools to help emergent children adjust to the magical world. Harry pocketed the coins, his chest swelling with a sense of pride and responsibility. I want to do that too, he said earnestly. Make a difference, like they did. Ted clapped a hand on his shoulder. You're already on your way, Harry. As the cart sped back toward the surface, Harry sat quietly, lost in thought. The enormity of his inheritance wasn't just about vaults or properties, it was about what he could do with them. He was connected to a legacy of change, of challenging the status quo, and of bridging divides between magical and non-magical worlds. When they emerged into the sunlight once more, Harry felt a shift within himself. The day had started with excitement for Hogwarts, but now, it held something deeper, a sense of purpose. Ready for the next stop? Ted asked, grinning. Harry returned the smile, gripping the pouch of coins tightly. I'm ready for anything. Flourish and blots. The towering bookstore packed with shelves upon shelves of magical texts. Inside, the air smelled of old parchment and freshly printed books, and the soft rustle of turning pages filled the space. As Harry wandered through the aisles, he noticed a girl about his age standing with her parents. Her wild, bushy brown hair framed a face lit with eager curiosity as she flipped through a thick textbook. She held a shopping list in one hand, ticking off items with quick strokes of a pencil. Curious, Harry approached her. Need any help? He offered, smiling. The girl startled slightly, turning toward him with wide eyes that quickly softened into a smile of her own. Oh, yes, thank you. I didn't mean to block the aisle. There are so many books. I've read about magic, of course, but seeing it all in person is, well, it's overwhelming. Harry chuckled, reaching for one of the books she'd been eyeing. It is a lot at first. I'm Harry, by the way. Harry Potter. Her eyes widened briefly at his name but didn't linger. Instead, her excitement bubbled over. I'm Hermione Granger. It's nice to meet you. I only found out I was a witch a few months ago, so this is all completely new. Harry glanced at her parents nearby, who were flipping through books with a mix of fascination and bewilderment. He gave them a polite nod before turning back to Hermione. I get what you mean. I didn't grow up fully in the magical world either. My guardians Ted and Andy. Ted is an emergent, and my Aunt Andy is what people would call a pure-blood witch, so I live in both world magical and mundane, but I have still so much to learn in both. Hermione tilted her head, intrigued. Emergent. What does that mean? It's something I started using after a trip to France, Harry explained, doubtful. You say different terms for magical people like us there. It made me think about the words we use here, like muggle-born or even muggle. Sometimes they're said with this bite, even if people don't mean it that way. It can make things seem more divided than they really are. Hermione frowned, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. You're right. Even in the books I've read, there's this tone when people talk about muggle-borns. Like we're outsiders. Exactly, Harry said, nodding. That's why I started using nommage for non-magical people, it's neutral. And instead of muggle-born, I say emergent. It focuses on the magic itself, not where someone comes from. Hermione's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. That's brilliant, Harry. It makes it sound magical. Like we all belong. That's the idea, Harry said with a small smile. There's so much to think about in the magical world. It's not just spells and potions, it's history, culture, and how we see each other. Hermione's excitement was infectious. I can't wait to get to Hogwarts. There's so much to learn. Do you think they'll teach us about magical cultures in other countries? Harry grinned. If they don't, I'll teach you. They got loads to share from my trip to France. The two continued talking as they browsed the shelves, their conversation flowing easily. By the time they parted ways, Harry felt a strange sense of kinship with Hermione. She was eager and curious, if not a tad overbearing at times, but he could be too if you talked about obscure magic, but besides all that he could already tell, she would be someone he wanted to know better. After finishing their shopping at Flourish and Blots, Harry and the Tonks family moved through the lively streets of Diagon Alley, ticking items off his school list one by one. The conversation with Hermione lingered in Harry's mind as he carried his new stack of books. Her enthusiasm and fresh perspective had felt refreshing, and her questions reminded him of his first encounters with the magical world. "She seems like she'll be a good friend," Dora said, breaking into his thoughts. She nudged him playfully. "Bit of a know-it-all, though. Bet she's already memorized half those books." Harry smirked, adjusting the weight of his bag. "She's curious. There's nothing wrong with that. I think she'll be brilliant." "Brilliant's one thing," Dora teased, her hair shifting to a fiery red as she grinned. "But let's hope she doesn't end up making us all look like slouches." Ted, overhearing the exchange, chuckled. "Curiosity's a good trait in the magical world. You both have it. Just don't let it steer you into trouble." He raised an eyebrow at Harry. "Or should I say, don't let Dora steer you into trouble." "I resent that," Dora said, though her mischievous grin betrayed her. "I've never steered Harry into trouble, on purpose." Harry laughed, shaking his head. The warmth of their banter carried them through the remaining errands. Soon, they were laden with cauldrons, potion ingredients, parchment, and robes. By the time they reached Ollivander's, the sky was streaked with shades of orange and pink. The narrow shop smelled of wood and varnish, and the air seemed to hum faintly with magic. Harry felt a twinge of nervous anticipation as he stepped inside. Stacks of long, narrow boxes towered precariously on every shelf, giving the space an almost labyrinthine feel. "Ah, Mr. Potter," said Mr. Ollivander, stepping out from the shadows as though he had been waiting all day just for Harry. His silvery eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "I've been expecting you." Harry swallowed but nodded, his heart beating faster. "Hello." Choosing a wand as a momentous occasion, Ollivander continued, his voice soft yet purposeful. "Every wand is unique, just as every wizard is unique. Finding the right match is an art as much as a science." He studied Harry for a moment before disappearing among the stacks. When Ollivander returned, he placed a slender box on the counter and opened it with reverence. "Try this. Ash wood, unicorn hair core, 10.5 inches. Quite supple." Harry picked up the wand and gave it a tentative flick, but nothing happened. The wand felt stiff in his hand. Unresponsive. Ollivander hummed thoughtfully, then handed him another. Ebony and dragon heartstring, 11 inches. Good for transfiguration. This wand sent a few golden sparks into the air before fizzling out. Harry frowned, feeling that his was resisting his magic intent. "Patience, Mr. Potter," Ollivander said softly, as though reading his thoughts. "The wand chooses the wizard, remember. Let's try this." The third wand sent a surge of warmth through Harry's hand the moment he touched it. He gasped slightly as a faint golden light emanated from the tip. The wand felt alive, as though it had been waiting for him. "Holly and phoenix feather," Ollivander murmured, watching the wand with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity. 11 inches, nice and supple. A powerful combination. Harry looked at him curiously. "What's so special about it?" Ollivander tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Curious. That wand shares a core with another. He phoenix who gave this feather provided only one other, a wand used by you-know-who." Harry froze, the wand suddenly heavy in his hand. "Voldemort," he echoed, the name sending a faint plus in his mind. "The wand chooses the wizard," Ollivander repeated, his voice calm but firm. "And while your wand may share a core, it is yours and yours alone. Great things await you, Mr. Potter, though whether they are for good or ill is up to you." Harry nodded slowly, gripping the wand tighter. He didn't fully understand the implications of what Ollivander had said, but something about the wand felt right. It felt like his. As they left Ollivander's, the group headed toward their final stop, Elop's Owl Emporium. Inside, the shop was alive with the hoots and flutters of owls of every size and color. Harry wandered between the cages, marveling at the snowy owls, barn owls, and tiny screech owls. One owl in particular caught his attention. A regal snowy owl with piercing amber eyes sat in the corner. Her feathers as white as freshly fallen snow. She stared at him intently, as though sizing him up. "I think I'll take this one," Harry said, pointing to the snowy owl. The shopkeeper smiled as he carefully transferred her to a cage. She's a fine choice, the shopkeeper said. Stubborn but a smart, loyal, and strong companion. Treat her well. Harry grinned as he carried the cage out of the shop. I'll call her Hedwig. As the family started back toward the leaky cauldron, a voice called out behind them. Harry, wait. Turning, Harry saw Hermione hurrying toward him, her parents trailing a few steps behind. She was clutching a thick stack of books to her chest, her eyes alight with excitement. I just wanted to say thank you, Hermione said, slightly breathless, her words tumbling out in a rush. For helping me earlier. And, well, I thought maybe we could write to each other before term starts. You know, to compare notes. Harry smiled warmly, his green eyes lighting up. Of course, I'd like that. We can use my new owl. Hedwig. He turned to the snowy owl's cage, leaning closer. Would you help us out, girl? Hedwig let out a soft, dignified hoot, as though granting her approval. Hermione beamed, her excitement bubbling over. Brilliant. There's so much to talk about. Magic, Hogwarts, everything. It's all just so fascinating, isn't it? It is, Harry agreed, his excitement bubbling up again. And there's so much more to learn. As Hermione waved goodbye and disappeared back into the crowd with her parents, Harry couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for the year ahead. Meeting Hermione had reminded him of just how big the magical world was and how to discover. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Harry sat by his bedroom window, Hedwig perched on the sill beside him. The day had been overwhelming, full of new experiences and emotions. The wand, the owl, meeting Hermione, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle slotting into place. He thought back to his conversation with Hermione about words and their hidden meanings. The terms people used to define others, muggle, muggle-born, no-mage, emergent, were more than just words. They carried weight, shaping how people saw themselves and each other. Harry felt a flicker of determination. He didn't know how yet, but he wanted to challenge those old ideas, to make the magical world a place where everyone could belong. Hedwig hooted softly, her amber eyes reflecting the fading light. Harry reached out to stroke her feathers, a smile tugging at his lips. Ready for Hogwarts, girl? He murmured. Because I think I am. And for the first time that day, he felt entirely certain. Hogwarts was just the beginning.